think, yeah, sorry, that's all I got. It's a Wildling stream, folks. What is this highfalutin tower here? What is this hoity-toity Southron construction? This is not what we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about the opposite of this. We're here to talk about their awesome Viking hats. Oh, Grey Waste Tim, you like my song. Thank you. I appreciate that. And I appreciate your helmet. Thank you for being here. Welcome.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Yes, well, it's the Wildling stream, Tim, and I can't really get wild all by myself. So we gotta up the mojo. And in fact, let's go ahead and bring in the chat and the doc. Oh yes. Oh yes. Hey friends. It's I almost called this an iceberg stream. And it basically kind of is a mini iceberg. We're doing all things Wildlings. So we're going to talk about we're going to disaster hunt the Wildlings. Something bad did happen to them. It's called they built the wall. And we're going to sort of talk about, who they are, the different regions, the different peoples, the different religions. But we're also going to talk about the Wildling VIPs. So as we scroll down, there's all kinds of VIPs. Varamir and Mance and Val and Dalla and Morna White Mask. And you know, all those folks. And of course, Osha the Wildling, who has care of a little someone called Rickon Stark. And that means, Tim, that at the end of this live stream, the latter portion, we're going to deliver to you the much-awaited, long-awaited, much-anticipated, and delayed Winds of Winter predictions, Rickon. Yeah, it's not Winds of Winter. Winds of Winter is delayed, folks. That's true. Even more than our stream. But I did at one point promise a Rickon Winds of Winter. So we're going to get there because Skagos is very much a blend of Wildling culture and Northern culture. And Rickon is in the care of a Wildling. So it's a great plot point to sort of sum up the Wildling influence on the story. So this will be a fun one. Me and Tim just finished working up a hot outline. It's a cold outline, actually. We're up north, and we're not wearing shoes, Tim. We're hornfoots, obviously, and we don't wear shoes. It's not very practical, is it?
Nah. And I guess we should be one of us should be wearing antlers and the other wearing walrus tusks, and then we could have a good old-fashioned feud like those men of the frozen shore.
But then we would need a Mance Rayder to come along and heal the wounds and bind us together because we'd be fighting. Right.
Settle our disputes. We can't be squabbling over who has the cooler hats when death is coming from the north.
Mance just came along. He's like, people, your walrus hats and your antler hats are both much cooler than anyone else's hats. You guys are the hat kings. You should get along and marry each other's daughters and just call it a win. And the Wildling nation was born. So the Hatfields and McCoys, yeah. There's the antler hat wearing and the walrus tusk hat wearing. Frozen Shore Wildlings. They don't like each other. So that's what we got for you today. So let's get into it. I will disappear the outline and bring up just the main doc. What's good, fellas? Just wondering what your thoughts are on all these new Song of Ice and Fire shows and the movie. Oh, yes, that's right. I kind of feel a bit torn, loving it and worrying that Warner is just milking it. Guys, it's capitalism. Yes, they're milking. Of course. Like that's what we're here to do, make money. Not we, but the capitalists. In any case, we're here to give them money. We're a small part of the food chain. So what is Tim, have you heard about this?
No, I must be out of the loop. I didn't hear anything about a movie. What's the topic?
Ironically, your hat has a loop, but in the loop is alcohol and not a Song of Ice and Fire information.
Yeah, but we're not going to risk
the evening.
We're not going to risk open cans of fluid around my computers. We did that once, and I spilled. That's
right. I remember that. That looks like a shade of the evening hat. If that is dispensing any liquid, that's all that's coming out of that thing. So, yeah, they said there's nothing confirmed. Very early news. They might be developing in a Song of Ice and Fire movie. Warner Brother, who owns HBO. So this is following the trend of many other franchises where we're doing TV shows and movies. It's not a bad idea in theory. any new project that they do, we're going to worry about whether or not it's going to be good, because their track record is kind of, it's pretty good. Like, we've had fun watching the Game of Thrones show and the House of the Dragon show. There's things left. I mean, there's complaints to be had, but I mean, overall, I'm happy that we're getting stuff on TV. So, I mean, you know how George is. Like, he makes a new series, and then a year later he hates it, and he's excited about the new one, and then he'll hate that one and make a new one, and he's excited about that one. So right now it's about Dunk and Egg, and who knows, guys? If you were gonna, let's be interesting here. If you were gonna make an Ice and Fire movie, any time period, like, what's coming to your mind first?
I mean, I think The Conquering could be covered in a feature-length film. Maybe like a 2.5 to 3 hour movie. We could probably make that one up. And that's why I'm wondering, if they're doing a movie that's like, what's going to be the plot point?
Yeah, The Conquest is definitely one where when they announced the Conquest show, I was kind of like, that might be a better movie. Yeah. But let's see, what else do we got for a movie? Robert's Rebellion. Yeah, that's another one that people are talking about. You have to think about like single big events. Obviously, you could go back into the past. I would really like to see the whole Nymerius thing spread out over a TV series, but you could do that in a couple movies, perhaps. Cut out some of the Sothorio stuff. But no, I think those are the two most likely guesses. The Doom could be a good movie. Yep. You could definitely do the setup to the event and Einar moving to Dragonstone and the Doom, and yeah, that could be one. So it probably won't be any of those things. Who knows? But all right, so we're going to talk about the Wildlings, but yeah, that's all we have right now is speculation. It's out there. If you guys want to keep talking about it in the chat, that is cool. You have my permission. Tim, who are the Wildlings now? They're wild people. They're wild, right? They're crazy. They just don't know any law. I've got my refused Shape of Punk to Come shirt on. What do you got?
I got my we read banned books. So we got King in Yellow, Cthulhu, Shub-Niggurath. So we got our King in Yellow play, our Necronomicon, all the banned books.
King in Yellow reference, drink. I'm pretty sure that would be on the Tim drinking game bingo card. Very good, Tim. Stay hydrated. So there's different geographical regions, and we know them and love them. There's the Haunted Forest, home of such places as Craster's Keep and White Tree, where Craster's mother comes from. And also where babies are sometimes burned in the mouth of the Weirwood Tree. We have the Frostfangs, which is a big mountain range. And actually, Tim, why don't you read this and I'll pull up the map. I'm not going to do a ton of pictures today, but I will pull up the map so we can just take a look.
Okay, so we have the Frozen Shore, which is north of Bear Island. Do you want me to wait until you actually have it up?
No, go for it.
The Valley of Thenn, which is one of our Valley of Thenn is the northernmost point that's still habitable before we finally hit the Lands of Always Winter. Starld's Point, which is the location of Hardhome, the only Wildling city. Then that's the far, far north, which would be the Lands of Always Winter. And then we also have, below the wall, we still have some Wildling culture because we have the mountain clans in the mountains north of Winterfell, and we have the mountains in the Vale, the mountain clans who live in the Mountains of the Moon.
Cool. So here's some of those places. You see the Haunted Forest. This is Craster's Keep right here, I believe. And then as it goes up, this is the Valley of Thenn, this little green valley here. Bloodraven's Cave is somewhere, past these lakes. And the Frostfangs is a huge region. So the Valley of Thenn is like at the top of the Frostfangs. Who knows how far it goes up? And you can see the frozen shore here. This just tells you whoever made this map doesn't know anything about what's going on here. But yeah, these are almost like Inuit peoples on the frozen shore. They're seal hunting and whale hunting. We'll talk about that. And you can see how close Bear Island is to the frozen shore. I mean, that's a quick little kayak raiding trip away there, Tim. Get yourself a bear woman. If you can, if you dare.
We'll get to that part too when we talk Tormund.
Sea Dragon Point, also very close. And the Ironborn also have a lot of influence over Bear Island and Sea Dragon Point, such as to the point they're almost like amalgam cultures, which is something we're going to talk about today. So yeah, there's several cultural influences going on, and that is why Bear Island is a little different. It's a little wilder, if you will. And then Eastwatch by the Sea is an important location here, and there's like a gorge and the Bridge of Skulls. Eastwatch is where the most Wildling Night's Watch trade of information goes on. So I'll minimize that for now. I'll keep it around, but that's pretty much what you got. And then I mentioned also we've got the Wildlings in the Vale Mountains and in the Northern Mountains. They're not, so this is where you, sometimes when you look at documentaries of ancient cultures, we have a name for a group of people. And they'll say, well, these are this group of people. They might not have thought about themselves as a unified nation, but they practiced a common way of life. And so we, looking back on history, we give a name to their culture. Similar thing here. The people in the Vale Mountains and the mountains in the north, they don't travel north of the wall to vote for Mance Rayder in the election and then go back home. They're not connected, but they are living a similar lifestyle. And that is because the Wildlings are remnants of first men, as we'll get into. Mm-hmm. So those are the areas. More interesting are the tribes. So Tim, tell us about the giants while I try to clear my throat a little bit here.
Okay, so north of the wall in the land of the free folk is where we have our last remaining vestiges of the giants, who, like the children of the forest, were once all throughout Westeros, but as time has gone on, as the age of man has come, the giants have been pushed further and further north until the last remaining giants are the ones that we see north of the wall, who have taken cause with Mance Rayder. We've got giants who ride mammoths. They live in caves in the mountains. They tend to be 10 to 14 feet tall, shaggy, horned feet, small eyes. And that's actually on the smaller end, because if we go in the east, the Jogwin, the stone giants, were said to be twice as big. So our Westerosi giants are actually little baby giants compared to what's out in the scary, scary far east, or at least used to be.
How did those little wiry Jogos Nye defeat these 20-foot tall stone giants? Did their Zorses like spit acid blood or something that like melted the stone? What was their trick?
Maybe I don't know. That would be something to see, like to know more about those legends of how true is this really? Did you guys actually pull this off?
I mean, they must have, because it's recorded in history that they literally like exterminated the Jogwin. So my guess would be that they're like the Imperial Walkers. You just got to rope them around the feet. They topple over, and that's pretty much it. A 20-foot tall stone giant. That would be that's how I would try to attack them. I'd try to trip them with, the bowl of things, and like you picture the Zorse riders. They'd ride in and they'd be like, whoa, 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 shh. Or they'd use tag teams and they'd have like long, cords they'd trip them up with or something. I don't know. Set traps in the valley.
Just like a whole series of Home Alone traps to take down the giants.
You don't want to, get into a fist fight with a stone giant. I know that. So, yeah, there's your movie, Warner Brothers. Just take our advice. Okay, look, whatever you're thinking about doing, just scrap it and give us the Jogwin versus the Jogos Nye. I mean, come on, this is great. Anyway, different giants. As you say, these ones are not made of stone. They're made of smelly meat, and they're kind of hairy, and they get wider as they go down. So their torsos, like the lower half of the torso is wider than the upper half, and they're sort of sloped, and they have big brow ridges and small eyes, big teeth. They're constantly snuffling. They have good sense of smell, so they smell as much as they see. They do speak the old tongue, though, and they're closer to the people of Thenn, who also speak the old tongue. And, of course, Jon meets one, and it makes a joke. It looks at Jon and calls him a maid, because he's got a shaved face. And I don't know if it's a joke or if it's a genuine. I took it as a joke, but anyway, they're hanging out, they're bantering, so they're kind of animalistic, but they're definitely like, intelligent creatures, and they apparently don't have kings, but there is sometimes it seems like they have a leader or a mightiest among them, and there's songs about kings of the giants, but it's hard to say.
Yeah, because this like Jon is told that the giants do not have a king yet. When it comes to Magmar To Dunwug, however we pronounce that, Mag the Mighty, we'll just call him for simplicity's sake. He does think of him as a king of the giants, and there are stories of kings of the giants in the past. So sometimes it's something we'll talk about too, especially when we talk about Stannis and Selyse and Melisandre. The way that Westerosi just envision these things, because they're trying to think of things in terms that they understand. The idea of the king beyond the wall and the king of the giants. And it's like, look, these aren't kings in the sense that you think of a king. Like, these are guys who got there because people felt like they were the best person to follow or the mightiest warrior and things like that. It has nothing to do with blood or lineage.
So we're going to see that a few times. It's going to come up how the Southerners try to interpret Wildling culture through the context of Greenlander culture, and it's like they just don't quite get it. So great super chat here from Ray Blackfire. Rickon will return acting like a wildling and will be the Stark to unite wildlings and Northerners, maybe adopted by Magnar and the Karstark girls. Settle the gift. Okay, so you're talking about Sigurn, the Magnar of Thenn, who is now Lord Karstark because he married Alice Karstark after we deposed the evil uncle and threw him in the ice cell. And so we are going to talk about those two because they're a very important piece of potential. Let me start that sentence over. They will be an important factor in helping Wildling culture assimilate to the Southern culture. So you're right to bring them up in the same breath as, let me just scroll back up, as Rickon, because Rickon is under care of a wildling. The Skygosi are half wildling. So you can see that wildling culture is set to have a pretty big influence on the North in the events to come, in the wars to come. So yes, we are all hoping for, obviously, the enormous goats, the unicorn goats, and Skygosi riding the unicorn goats into battle. Hopefully we'll get something like that. But we'll get there. We'll get there. And then the other super chat from Kelly Johnson. Mel says the wildlings won't survive the long night. Well, not on the north of the wall, they won't. That's why Jon had to let him through.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So giants, like I said, they used to live all throughout Westeros. And it said, like, there's still giant remains are still found in the Westerlands. It said that they were all the way down to the Red Mountains of Dorne. So you can see, like, as more and more humans, as we know, as the First Men and later the Andals and all these other groups going, we really see just how far, like, not only the Children of the Forest, but the giants have just been pushed out of their ancestral homelands and just relegated all the way up to this far, far north. And it's interesting, too, that the giants speak the Old Tongue, because the Old Tongue is presumably a human language. So it begs the question of what were they communicating using in the time before man? Were they speaking the same language as the children who sing the song of the earth? So it's like, what is the giants' like native tongue? Because the Old Tongue seems to be something that they've adopted as a means of communicating with the people beyond the wall that they're now relegated to living with.
It could be that, or it could be that the Old Tongue is from the giants and that the First Men picked it up from them. That could even be too. I wish I had more clarity, actually, Tim, on, is the Old Tongue just the original language of the First Men, and they speak essentially what they call the common tongue now is essentially Andal. So the Starks are speaking Andal. I think that's what is the deal, but I'm not sure if the common tongue is something that changed over and took over before the Andals came. Chat, what's your perception of that? Is that how you
Maybe
think
the
about it too? The old tongue is the first men before the Andals?
maybe the old tongue is actually like Pigeon Creole, just this hodgepodge of different languages all mashed together to create something new. Whatever the first men spoke when they came out from Essos, and then mixed in with the languages that the children and the giants were speaking when they made it to Westeros.
Yeah, I think most of the chat seems to say that that's how they understood it too. Yeah, so that old tongue, probably what it is it's the native first man language, but it's probably got a lot of loan words from, the children, whatever the children and the giants are speaking. But you could be right, Tim. It could be that the giants learned the old tongue in order to communicate with the humans. Now, the name the Squirrel People, that is what the giants call the children in the old tongue. So the giants' name for the children of the forest is in the old tongue. Now, maybe there's an even older language that the giants spoke before the old tongue, but if the old tongue is the native language of the giants and has been for a long time, that does raise questions. But Tim, we've even questioned the whole evolution of humankind in this universe. Did humans evolve from giants or vice versa? Is it like children of the forest plus giants equals humans?
It could just be one of those things of like, you look at English from 1,000 years ago, and it's going to look like a completely different language from the English that we speak now. So maybe the old tongue has just gone through transformations over time.
And then the true tongue. Okay, thank you. The true tongue is the native language of the children. And that basically sounds like nature sounds, but it's a language. So, yeah, I would think the giants might speak that too, but I don't think that is said. So, this is something I would ask George if I was interviewing him, because he'd probably be willing to talk about it. But it's like, yeah, can you just sort this out for me? Like, is everybody speaking Andal now? Is that what's going on? I think that is what's going on. So, now the giants, interestingly, you mentioned they're south in Dorne. They're apparently in the Reach. They're in the Legends of the Great Empire of the Dawn, coming to Old Town or the First High Towers, all that stuff. Garth the Green sires Jon the Oak on a giantess. That's in the Reach too. So the picture we're given is that ancient Westeros, the giants and the children are spread all throughout, just as are the Squishers. And we don't know how widespread the Green Men are. They were in probably most of the South, and not just the Isle of Faces, judging by the Reach and Stormlands mythology. But another interesting thing is that the Wildlings north of the Wall still do remember the Green Men and revere them. So that shows you that their connection to ancient First Men culture.
Yeah, and then of course there's the Maze Makers of Lorath, who might have been an offshoot of giants. And then we have like the giant human intermingling, like House Umber. Their sigil is a giant. The Skagosi have giant's blood and also Ibonese blood. The Hornfoots, we got our Dunklings. Then there's House Oakhart, Garth the Green. Garth, who would bang anything that moves, sired a child, one of his many, many, many wives, many baby mamas, one of whom was supposedly a giantess. That ends up with the Garth son, Jon the Oak, who is the ancestor of House Oakhart. So their giants were once very, very just prominent, not just in Westeros, but all over the world.
Yes, and we'll have to table the conversation, but yeah, we've gone into it in the end of the Great Empire of the Dawn iceberg, like the whole question of origins and evolution. There does seem to be. Do the lizard men are humans come from strange human animal hybrids and they distilled humanity out of those creatures? Or are some of these things actually human animal hybrids? Yeah, we've talked about that a few times. And then there's the Ibonese. The Ibonese, who are like related to the hairy men and thus kind of quasi-Neanderthal-like, they seem to have possibly interbred with Skagosi. And so there's questions if the Skagosi have giant's blood or Ibonese blood or both. The Ibonese might be related to the giants. So George's meaning for us to sort of, wonder. We're in the maester's shoes here. We're pondering out the evolution of all these ancient humanoids, and we're not quite sure. So it's kind of like when the first scientists started discovering Neanderthals and missing links and trying to speculate about evolution. Like, it was our
Sussing
first
out
idea about something,
sussing out our Neanderthals from our Cro-Magnons and thinking, where does Homo sapien come from? It's like, well, we don't know. That's too far out there for us to go on right now.
Okay, I think the chat should. Yeah, I just scrolled up. Yeah, it wasn't for us. But let me do these super chats real quick. Sorry, guys. What are the chances the neck was the location of the original wall? They're existent. I talked about that in the Moat Kalen video. I think it's like a decent little chance. Yeah, I wouldn't call it likely, but it's a possibility. And then I'm intrigued by the whole situation with the wall and the wildlings. The wall didn't just appear out of nowhere, correct? It was built. It may have been built quickly, though, with sorcery and not slowly with ice blocks, I will say. How was the whole nation left behind? So we got a whole section to address that question. So we'll come back to that. And yeah, no problem. Thank you. Thanks, chat. Thanks, mods, by the way. Love all y'all. And okay, so now we're doing. Oh, and then also the giants do bury their dead, which is interesting because the rest of the wildlings tend to burn their dead because, the whole white thing. The giants bury their dead, though. And we know Mance was digging around in Giant's grave, supposedly, when he found that horn that looks like Dragonbinder, but isn't, but might be related or something, video forthcoming. And we also know that there is, some people think, the Great Barrow in the Barrowlands is the grave of a giant. It's also thought to be the grave of the first king, which sounds like it might be Garth, but Garth was a green man, and I think the green men were tall too. And I think the giants and green men could be related, and we're back to evolution talk. So there is some question about all of this, but in any case, the giants do bury their dead, and it is connected with the Great Barrow in that way. So it was Garth the Green, a green giant. Of course he was. He was a jolly green giant.
Yeah.
It's right there.
That he definitely is the jolly green giant. You could see him right there on your can of peas.
Yep, that's him. So that's pretty much what we have to say for giants. And then, of course, we do see them fighting with Mance Rayder, as you mentioned at the beginning. Then we have the Thenns. They live in that hidden valley at the north of the Frostfang mountain range that we saw. And their Magnar it means Lord or something like that. But the emphasis is like Lord as in divine human that is a ruler. So it's like God King. And he has absolute authority over the Thenns, which makes them very unique among all wildling cultures. And the Magnar, part of his like unofficial title is the last of the first men, which would apply to the whole nation of Thenn. So that's where we see the strongest wildling connection to ancient first man traditions. They wear bronze armor. They follow a hereditary king, and he has that cool weirwood spear also. So makes you think that weir spears might have been more common back in the day.
Yeah, and because the Thenns, unlike the Wildlings, who we think of as being the free folk, and we were talking like when we were making this script, we were debating like where they fall in like the political spectrum, and it's like, well, they're not a monolith. They kind of run the gambit between libertarian all the way to the left to where we're at anarcho-communism. But the Thenns are more, despite being so far north, they actually are more Southron because they have a system of lords and laws and inheritance, and it's what's going to make the Thenn, when Sigorn marries Alice Karstark, it's what's going to make the Thenns like probably the most successful of the wildling groups when it comes to assimilating into Westerosi culture, because of this system of laws and lords inheritance, and them being bronze workers too. They have a trade that's going to be welcome in the north when they establish their house, and they've already established a sigil, one that they are borrowing off of the Karstark sigil, adapting and making their own, which again is going to ingratiate themselves better into Westerosi culture.
Great points all. And from a political standpoint, you can really see how this Karstark Thenn marriage, to the Magnar is like just so important. It's probably the best thing that the Stannis, Jon, Selyse, brain trust. They're all on the same page with bringing the wildlings south of the wall, if you recall. This is probably the best thing they did, was that marriage. So it started with Jon having a little bit of moral clarity and discerning the truth with not Arnulf. Yeah, was it Arnulf? Is he the one that gets thrown in the ice cell? No, Arnulf is with Stannis. It's a different. There's a lot of nasty Karstark uncles, but Tim will look it up. But the point is, Jon correctly. He's so quasi interfering, but he's also doing justice. Protecting Alice, and that leads to this marriage between Alice and Sigrun. So, yeah, and it is arranged, but I think Alice must see the wisdom in it too. And it says that Sigrun is strangely, even though he's like this thin warrior, he's balding and he looks older than his age, but he is strangely gentle, quote unquote, with his Karstark wife. And we remember how Alice is. Like she's, she had the courage to flee her uncle and flee to Castle Black. And she has some fiery words during the wedding. It's a great scene, the whole wedding there. But the point is, it's cute and it's important, that relationship. Mm-hmm. So what do you got, Tim?
Yeah, Arnulf Karstark is trying to force Alice to marry his son Cregan so that he can lay claim to Karhold.
Right.
Roose has promised Arnulf a full pardon for his service to the Lannisters.
Right. So this is the same people that are trying to betray Stannis to Roose.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So yeah, Jon did a good job foiling that, and then an even better job, whoever's idea it was, to set up this wedding. So yeah, there we go. And then so the Thenns. I mentioned the Weirwood spear. Odin has not a Weirwood spear, but he has a spear that's made of Yggdrasil, his tree, his sacred tree, which is the inspiration for the Weirwood. And that spear is called Gungnir. And so the Magnar with the Weirwood spear is very much a parallel to Odin with his with Gungnir. And I eventually noticed that the Magnar of Thenn, if you say it Magnar o Thenn, you're basically saying Odin, because the hard D is the more modern pronunciation. The classic pronunciation is Odin, like that. So Magnar o Thenn, you're basically saying Odin, and that's pretty clever. So that's what we got to say about the Thenns. We will talk about Sigrun and Styr a bit in more detail in the Wildling VIP section. VIP. But then we got those Hornfoots. Tim, why don't they wear shoes? I'd ask George that question too. Like, George, did you really think that one through? It's not practical.
Yeah, they don't wear shoes, so the soles of their feet have turned like thick and black and calloused, and it's like, I don't know why. They just seem they take pride in their frostbite for whatever reason.
The one clue that we found is that the giants are said to have hard, horny feet and walk barefoot. So it could be that the Hornfoots living near the giants have a little more giant's blood, and that's where they picked up this tradition. And yeah, I guess it could be a Hobbit reference. Yeah, I guess that makes sense. Yeah. There are Hornfoots among the hobbits, aren't there? There's Proudfoots. And are there Hornfoots? Specifically, it's a Hobbit reference either way, but I can't remember if there is an actual Hornfoot family. There's Harfoots and Proudfoots, proud feet. That's right. Cool. So those are the Harfoots. Got me all turned around. The Hornfoots. They don't wear shoes. They wear furs. They carry long spears. They live in the Frostfangs. That's about all we know. And they used to fight with the Night Runners until Mance Rayder came along and settled the fighting. He's like, look, you guys, you're the fastest runners. You have cool black feet. You're the Night Runners. You guys should marry each other's daughters and call it a win. That's his speech every time. So, yeah. Men of the Frozen Shore. We know a little bit more about the Men of the Frozen Shore, don't we, Tim?
Yeah, they're the ones we talked about before. We got two groups, one who wear walrus tusk hats and one who wear antler hats, and they don't like each other. And we don't know the reason why, but I like to think it's just one big fight over who has the cooler hat. And I think it's just one of those examples of like the stupid reasons that people look to hate each other is what kind of probably what we see with the ice river. I mean, with the men of the frozen shore.
Yeah, and there's a little bit of a reference to what I think and Crowfoot's daughter from Disputed Lands have found as a pattern of squishers and green men, factions opposing each other. It goes all the way back to the Reach. You can find it on the Iron Islands. We don't have time for that, but this is seemingly another pattern of that. Now, more serious point, more relevant point. Okay, I missed a super chat. I will come back to that. The more relevant point is that we can see Deep One influence among the Wildlings. We're going to talk about that more later, but this would be the first instance of it. The walrus people, they're using walrus bone, everything. Now it is very, like I said, very Inuit inspired here. But when we think about the Deep One influence in Iron Islands culture, we'll be able to see it here as well as on Skagos. Now, as far as super chats go, there was a really good one back here. Are the free folk the greatest source of green blood? And I think you mean repository, meaning like, do they have the most green blood? They probably would, simply because they don't kill skin changers. They don't throw them down wells like they sometimes do in Westeros. Like Varamir, when he was a kid, killed his brother, and his parents still didn't throw him down a well. They brought him to Hagen. And we see that skin changers, they're like feared, but also respected in north of the wall. And so for that fact alone, they breed more often, and there's going to be more of that bloodline running around. But they also may have had more green blood simply because there's like more children up there and the old ways are stronger. So you could see that being true as well. How come the free folk have so few green seers? Well, we don't really know, Kelly. We don't know how many green seers they were. We don't know who was the green seer before Bloodraven. But the population of the Wildlings is probably not very big. These are small groups of people. So, yeah. So the men of the frozen shore, they breed reindeer, and they're said to worship cold gods of snow and ice, which are probably the others, right? I mean, I can't imagine who else that would be. So Craster is probably not the only one. We've said that before. So what about the Ice River clans, Tim?
So the Ice River clans, these are the cannibals, which in the show they changed it to the Thenns. Because I guess that's where we get that line like, Thenns, I hate Thenns. And I guess Thenns just sounds like a more cannibalistic sounding name than just Ice River clans. But in the book, these are the guys who are said to be who are the cannibalistic ones. They live in the far, far north, and not the far, far north, but they live farther north, and they war with the frozen shore people. So again, like we're seeing like all these feuds that when we start to talk about Mance Rayder, like before Mance can put any of his plans into actions, having to settle all of these feuds between all of these different clans who hate one another for one reason or another, going back centuries, if not millennia, for some slight or some insult, lost to history. And it's like just showing like, hey, the Wildlings are have a lot more in common with the Westerosi than they think, because this is like some classic Blackwood Bracken stuff happening. It's like just above the wall, people do as people do, people keep peopling.
Indeed. And I'm going to talk about this more later, but like the idea of barbarians being like, oh, we need to make a wall to keep the barbarians away from the civilized lands, that happens everywhere. Like the more you explore history, you see it everywhere. You go to the Mesopotamia, the Fertile Crescent, all the subsequent Mesopotamian cultures, the Sumerians and the Assyrians and all these things.
Yeah.
There's always people up in the mountains, up in the Zagros Mountains and the Caucasus Mountains. And there's those damn hill tribes are always coming down and raiding. And every once in a while, they'll be like, huh, we kind of like it here. Let's call ourselves kings and be civilized people for a little bit. And they form a new dynasty of civilized wild people. And it goes over and over and over. It happened with the Mongols. It happens everywhere.
Yeah, it's like, they're not barbarians, they're just Scottish. What's the difference? No, I love you, Scotland.
And that's why we see, like, even in Westeros, up in the mountains, where it's hard to build roads and castles and things, you still have wildlings. You still have people living like that. And it's probably the same situation where some of those people have always lived in the mountains and practiced those ways. And then periodically you get outlaws and things that flee civilized society and might even join these groups of wildlings. And shout out to that one Arryn heir who might have been abducted. Right? It's part of the Timett theory. The Timett is actually heir to the Vale. You know what I'm talking about?
No, this is a new theory. I've never heard this one.
So there was an Arryn heir who was abducted by the mountain clans a couple gens back, or maybe one gen back, and they were red-haired. So there are some clues that Timett is the son of that woman and would actually be heir to the Vale before Harry the heir. I don't have all the details to explain the theory. You guys have to look at it. But yeah, it exists. That's a theory.
Oh, that's a new one to me.
Yeah, Timett's awesome. So you got to love that. Okay, so the Ice River clans. And then we have cave dwellers. They're not, they're just kind of filling it out. They have faces dyed blue and green and purple and filed teeth. And the most interesting thing to me was that they worship dark underground gods. And we think of Leng, where the old ones are underground, because the old ones might be the green men. And the green men might have made those underground faces in the Rainwood. So underground and green men might be kind of a thing. So those underground gods, that could be some remnant. Maybe they're worshiping stone faces in caves, kind of like we see in the Rainwood or something like that.
Yeah, the cave dwellers, they're another instance of all of these things that sound like they're coming out of Essos, especially the Far East, yet here they are in the North, because dyeing their faces blue, green, and purple, but we know they do that in the Free Cities. Tyroshi dye their beards and hair green, blue, and purple. The filed teeth, that's a thing we see on the Thousand Islands with the green-skinned fish people. And then worshipping dark underground gods is the exact thing we hear about in Leng when the underground the Lengi god empresses take Congress with the old ones. So it's like the cave dwellers have all of the weirdest aspects of the East, and yet here they are in the far, far North. And that's going to come into play when we start talking about like why is so much of this Eastern myth showing up in the north of Westeros.
Well, actually, I think we might be able to disaster hunt some of this. Let's think about it. The Tyroshi get their purple dye, a la the Phoenicians, from shellfish, a mollusk. Okay? And so these cave dwellers that have these dyes, they probably live in caves near the water, and they're probably collecting the very same mollusks. Sorry, I think I put some extra L's in there, S's, but they're probably collecting the same crustaceans, if you will, to get those dyes that the people in Tyrosh are. Instead of making very expensive cloths, they're just like dyeing their faces. Thank you. Thank you, guys. Yes, that's what I said. They're right there. And yeah, so that's where I would guess, because they're on the same side. They're on opposite sides of the same sea at about the same latitude. Or actually, well, no, the Wildlings are a bit north, but still could be the same crustaceans. So the other thing I think about is the filed teeth. We see that in the Thousand Islands, and that is almost certainly done as a part of squisher influence, because the squisher hybrids have filed teeth or pointed teeth. And we think that they may be filing teeth to make their women more attractive to the deep ones in a sort of sick, abusive, cult-like relationship. So it could be that these, if they're living in caves near the water to collect these mollusks to get this dye, then they would be occasionally farmed by squishers. And so their filed teeth probably have the same cultural origin as the Thousand Islanders. And so I give you clearly deep one hybridized cave dwellers. All the pieces were there, Tim. All the pieces were there. We put it together. You saw it here first. Cut that out for a video. Maynard Plum, the cave dwellers. Kidding. Anyway, let's talk about stuff that's a bit more important, like wildling culture. These are just the basics that are kind of common for all these wildling groups, or at least most of them. So go ahead and read through the first few here, Tim, and I'll start interrupting you.
All right, so they don't like kneelers. They follow strength. They have a custom of stealing women, but not from close by because they don't support incest. They don't like grayscale, according to the Val. Like, when they look at Shireen, they say there's no cure for that. It's just laying dormant. Kissed by fire hair, so redheads, gingers are lucky. Gingers do have souls past the wall. Skin changers are feared, but respected. Bastards are okay. There's no taint of bastardy. Hate the Night's Watch, but at the same time, occasionally are willing to trade with them. We see that a lot, especially at Eastwatch. There is a time where it's like when the rains fall in Africa, you know, and then the lions and the gazelles are drinking at the same watering hole. There are times where the Night's Watch and the free folk will come together for common cause and do some peaceful trading. But then it's like, okay, now we go back. You go back on your side of the line, and we'll go back to hating each other tomorrow. Anarchists, yeah, the anarchist commies, the occasional monarchists, or just good old-fashioned warlords. Again, like, they're not a monolith. The free folk have many different, and that's something we see too. Like, because without the nation, it is a lot more like tribalism. These different clans and cultures that are always at each other's throats, and then Mance has to overcome all of this to try and unite these people into one common cause. Some are nomadic, some are not. We know that some do try and set up shop. We get our little villages like White Tree, or they'll have like Tormund Giant's Bane, his ruddy hall. They burn their dead, which is a necessity. Eastwatch by the yeah, just said they do trading, both on goods and also information. Sometimes the Watch will raise a wildling orphan as a Night's Watch brother. That's how we get Mance Rayder, and some sort of custom of child sacrifice at White Tree, where we're talking about possibly setting a baby inside a mouth of the Great Weirwood.
Well spoken, Tim. Well spoken. And there's also oh, you skipped right over the the form of government stuff. I'm sorry, I meant to. You were going so fast. I forgot to pipe up and argue about this. We did. So we had approximately 15-minute debate about whether they were anarcho-communists. I mean, anarchist communists or anarcho-capitalists. I think I finally won that, because anarchist communists don't believe in private property, meaning land, but they do believe in personal property, meaning things. And that's where the Wildlings are. They believe the land belongs to everyone, but you can own, a skull drinking cup or whatever. So yeah, carry on in the chat or in the comments if you want to sort of play with that, but we'll just give a little nod to governmental theory. They don't think about themselves in those terms, but like we said, they follow strength. And the warlordism, I'm talking about like Vermeer. Like, anybody with a certain amount of power can sort of set themselves up as a warlord. Tormund does it with charisma. And Mance does a little bit of both. So we're going to talk about that in a second with Mance. But yeah, it is definitely true to the spirit of anarchy in that they are self-organizing. Everything just has to be worked out between each other, and whatever laws there are more like traditions, and they're understood, and they sometimes can be broken. So
because it is a sense of like, it can't be like, oh, you only own what you can take, because it's not like they're constantly just beating each other and killing each other and stealing from one another. There is a sense of community, but it's the idea of like, okay, yeah, you own that axe or you own those pigs, but you're not going to take acres and acres of land and say, I own all of this and all of you living here have to pay taxes to me or anything like that. Type of ownership is just, that's not heard of, that's not accepted among the free folk. That's not how this works.
Right, and that's the difference between anarchist communism and communism. Like, communism has a state that is redistributing to each according to his need, quote unquote. Anarchist communism is all self-organizing. So there's no state enforcement mechanism. So yeah, it's mostly the anarcho. But there is a belief among the wildlings that the land belongs to everyone and that people who try to claim land are wrong. And this goes back to the building of the wall and their differences with the Greenlanders and all that stuff. And like we said, some of them are nomadic. Some of them live in villages. So there's a mix of like hunter-gatherer or a little bit of, animal husbandry is probably more common than farming. We see Craster practicing that. And when the wildlings are moving in mass, there's a lot of sheep and cattle and things like that. They talk about goats and things. So yeah, there's hunter-gathering. There's, like I said, people living on the coast doing walrus and seal hunting and stuff. So it's pretty fun world building here, as far as George dipping into some more less civilized cultures, I guess you'd say. What is that thing stuck in the vent? Someone wants to know, and I am now curious. It's a mask, right? Your vent, Tim, above you?
That's a plague doctor mask, yeah.
Plague doctor mask. Okay. Very good. So now we get a great dose of wildling culture when Jon is accepting the gifts of the wildlings as they pass through the wall. So Tim, will you do me the favor of reading this passage? Because this is a really nice just snapshot of like, what does it have in its pockets? The random wildling.
Yeah. So as they passed, each warrior stripped off his treasures and tossed them into one of the carts that the stewards had placed before the gate. Amber pendants, golden torques, jeweled daggers, silver brooches set with gemstones, bracelets, rings, Nilo cups, and golden goblets, war horns and drinking horns, a green jade comb, a necklace of freshwater pearls, all yielded up and noted down by Bow and Marsh. One man surrendered a shirt of silver scales that had surely been made for some great lord. Another produced a broken sword with 3 sapphires in the hilt. And there were queerer things, a toy mammoth made of actual mammoth hair, an ivory phallus, a helm made from a unicorn's head, complete with horn. How much food such things would buy in the free cities, Jon could not begin to say. Mute it.
There's a couple things. So this is all just really interesting. But there is a couple of things worth commenting on. So golden torques. We see Tormund's got a bunch of them. He's got 2 on his arms and 1 around, well, it's much bigger than these small things on my arm, he says. So he gives these to Jon, but keeps the 1. And let's see here. We've got the silver brooches with gemstones, bracelets. Green jade comb is interesting. Just like, where did that come from? That probably came from the Far East on some shipwreck or something, kind of like the red silk from Ashai that washed ashore on a shipwreck. And then there's the broken sword with the 3 sapphires in the hilt. Some people think that could be Waymar's broken sword, which Will picked up but he then was killed right away. So he never brought that broken sword back to the wall, and thus it was sitting on the ground to be found. Someone probably found it. The thing about it is that Waymar's broken sword was described as being twisted like a tree struck by lightning, which is a very unnatural thing. You don't find a metal sword like all twisted and mangled up. It might be snapped or bent, but like twisted like a tree. Like, it's so weird and notable that it's if it's meant to be the same sword, it's weird that it wouldn't be described as a twisted sword and not just a broken sword. However, 3 sapphires, that's good other symbolism that matches Waymar, who ends up with a blue star eye, and Waymar is a lord. So his sword would be a fancy sword with jewels in the hilt, which would be a more rare thing north of the wall. So I would say that it is still a theory that is possible, and that George just didn't want to give it away by calling it twisted. But yeah, that's what I have to say about that. Tim, what do you think? Is that Waymar's sword?
So that I'm not sure. See, now, if there were rubies in
Maynard,
the hilt,
let's ask the chat. Let's do a poll. Maynard, if you're by your computer. Go ahead, Tim.
I was thinking, like, if it was rubies in the hilt, that would be a huge red flag, because red jewels and more of this Azor Ahai stuff, like Far Eastern things showing up in places where they probably shouldn't. But the sapphires, because that's more of a... Sapphires are blue, right? Normally?
Indeed.
Yeah. So, but sapphires are also would be in more ice imagery and speak more of others.
Right, and that fits Waymar's destiny, and it also makes sense that Waymar's sword would be given to Jon, because Waymar foreshadows Jon very heavily, right down to the moleskin gloves and the Stark's blood connection to House Royce. Check out A New Night's King ? Which is a video I made all about Waymar and what the others are looking for in Jon. So yeah, it would make poetic sense if it was Waymar's sword given to Jon. I just really get stuck on the twisted thing because it is so unique that it should be mentioned in the description, but maybe George forgot, or maybe he didn't want to give it away. George does forget little details. I mean, I'm just noticing that there's a bird chew on this side of the helmet. Goose did that. Let me see if this side might be clean. Odd. There we go. Little bastard bird. I love him, but you know. All right, so 60% on the initial response says yes. Get your votes in there, people. Vote like the world depends on it. Gotta rock the vote. All right.
But it definitely does seem, though, that Waymar Royce and his run-in with the others was a case of mistaken identity.
Indeed. So that was a very cool passage. And then we've got, the toy mammoth made of actual mammoth hair. That sounds a little funky. I don't know if you want to smell that thing in a clean room. Outside, you might not notice, but like you take it inside, like, let's throw that thing away. Then we have the ivory phallus, which is that's a little classier. And then we've got a helm made from a unicorn's head, complete with horn. I assume that means skull, right? It's not like a taxidermied head.
I would assume.
Hard to say.
Yeah, I would assume. Yeah.
Let's see. Yeah, there you go.
That sounds like something that's coming out of.
Just a little sampling of what the Wildlings have in their pockets. Oh gosh, look, it's a promo that I added to the doc surreptitiously not 5 minutes ago while Tim was reading the quote. Making Maynard proud over here. So guys, thank you for coming to the stream was last week. If you missed last week, we did a Halloween stream, top 20 scenes of murder and mayhem. So check that out if you missed it. But thanks for coming this week. And make sure you're subscribed to Grey Waste Tim's channel if you're not already, because Grey Waste Tim is awesome and he's got a lot of content. And of course, hopefully you're subscribed to my channel, but maybe there's new people that are just trying to figure out if this horny Lightbringer guy is worth subscribing to. The answer is yes. So then we've got the thumbs up. We appreciate that. If you click the thumbs up, that helps the stream a lot. And if you want to join the very non-toxic and safe discussion that we have in our Discord, fun but non-toxic, threading that needle, then all you have to do is click on our Patreon link in the description below, or click on the join button to join as a YouTube member. Either one will get you an invite to the Discord. And if you're short on funds, but you're a longtime fan of the program and you want to get in Discord, you can sign up for Patreon for free. And you'll still get some Patreon content, and you'll get an invite to the Discord. So that's how to get a Discord invite if you are tight on money. And I do appreciate those of you who support me and don't have money coming out of your pockets. I get that. So times are tough for all of us. So thanks for coming. We like the cut of your jib. I used that joke last time. I need to change it, but we do appreciate you coming. So next section, the North. How's our poll doing? We're believers. It's more fun to say yes. I'll say that. So there you go. Is it Waymar's sword? The chat thinks it might be. And yes, you can join Squisher. You get to send one sponsored message, one super chat message a month, and it's all green like that. Thank you, Alana, for using your message to promote my channel. That is called loyalty and teamwork. Appreciate that. So there you go. There's the poll. The North forgets, Tim. The North forgets a lot of stuff, specifically about the Wildlings. They've kind of forgotten that they're first men. That's the first thing they forgot.
Yeah. And that's something I've talked about many times, but it's always worth mentioning is the North as we know it, like the Starks, the Boltons, and all the noble houses, they're a lot more Southernized than they like to let on. They talk about like the blood of the first men runs through me, but we're going to get into instances where it's like, it kind of seems like you don't really know much about your own culture. This thing that you're, this thing that like you're hanging on to. You're like a believer who can't quote a Bible verse when asked. So it's like how much do you really know about your roots? And a lot of that, like especially when we get to the famous line of "You know nothing, Jon Snow." But yeah, so the Wildlings are like the last true holdouts, the true blood of the first men running through them, because as far as we know, the Andals don't go that far north. So this is like the last vestiges of true first man culture.
Let me pause you, Tim. That was actually a really great point. I'd like to stop and appreciate that. That line that Ygritte gives Jon over and over, "You know nothing, Jon Snow." That's what we're talking about. The thing that Jon doesn't know are these ancient cultural ways that the Wildlings share with the Starks and the other first men houses. And that is why it is such an important thing, and it's so poignant. And it takes Jon a while to figure out what she's even getting at. But like, even after her death, he's still working on it. And eventually he starts to understand. And that leads to him bringing the Wildlings through the wall and being like, look, they're people just like us. And they're going to be whites if we don't let it through. So that's kind of what she teaches Jon. And we're going to talk about Ygritte more, but the Ygritte-Jon plot line, a major dynamic is this thing that we're talking about. The North having forgotten their roots. Go ahead, Tim. Great point. Well said.
Yeah, so we have our old gods worship, green man worship, others worship, deep ones worship, and woods witches. Again, like the Wildlings are numerous different tribes and clans, so also we have numerous different religions. And then we had our cave dwellers who worship underground gods. So a good mix, but I would say the most prominent one, though, would be the old gods. And what we are not seeing, of course, is the Faith of the Seven. And what we are now being introduced to with Stannis, with Melisandre, with the Wildlings coming south of the wall and tossing their weirwood branches into the fire, is some of them now adopting R'hllorism.
Yeah, George really loves to evolve the religions. Like I said, the deep ones religions you can find first men that lived near the shore, having been influenced by Deep One's culture, on the Three Sisters and at White Harbor and the Iron Islands and elsewhere. We see a little bit of it on Skagos, which we'll talk about, and possibly with those cave dwellers. They worship crab gods. I forgot to put that on here. Near Storald's Point, there are crab gods, and that's probably a Deep One thing. No, I didn't forget. That's what I meant by Deep One's worship. Yeah, I was thinking about the crab gods. That's near Hardhome, by the way. The other worship is the Men of the Frozen Shore. We talked about that. Green Man worship is a little sketchier. I don't know if worship that might go too far, but they at least remember the Green Men. And one of the kings beyond the wall called himself the Horned Lord. So just as the Green King of the God's Eye and the first Durndon kings, they are trying to use the majesty and power and authority of the Green Man and take that on and to signify that they are kingly, if you will. And so, yes, there we go. And those are our religions. Yeah, so old gods worship is the most common. And then the wood witches, I put them on here because that's sort of like a religious tradition. But they're like, medicine women, wise women. They're potentially compatible with, with some of these other religions. Now, let's see. Yeah, I did miss a super chat. Hang on. Alice Arn's second oldest daughter was kidnapped by the burned men. She is likely Timot's mother, making him the true male heir to the Vale. Thank you, Matthew. So
would he come before Sweet Robin too? In that case?
I don't know the answer to that question. Maybe Matthew knows. This could definitely be if Sweet Robin dies, then he would be the oldest heir. But maybe because at one point, Jon Arryn, I don't know if Jon Arryn is the firstborn son. But yeah, my knowledge of Vale succession only goes so far. Matthew, if you know the answer, pipe up. Welcome to Squisher. Oh, so he joined Squisher and then used his message. See, yeah, instead of doing a super chat, might as well join Squisher and then send a sponsored message. So there you go.
Yeah.
Cool.
Oh, everyone asking where Damon is. He's up in the kitchen eating. It's dinner time for them.
There you go.
He'll come down when he feels like it. I don't make him come to the streams. He chooses when he wants to be on camera.
Matthew says no. So he doesn't come before Sweet Robin, but he would be before Harry the Heir. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So those are their religions. Lots of different religions. And now Relorism, although one doubts the conversion seems to be kind of by force. So yeah, one doubts the authenticity. Now, thematically, we talk about it a lot on this channel, but one of the most important themes of the story is reconciliation. We've got all of these strifes, these Blackfire Rebellion and all these, the Brackens and Blackwoods and all these rivalries. And they're all sort of commenting on the same thing, which is, it's, oh God. Ilaria Sand. It's her speech. When does it end? So you kill the people that killed our family members and then their children kill your children. When does it end? And George is asking that question all through the story about violence. So this is kind of this idea of like otherizing a group of people and telling stories about them as a justification for treating them as subhuman. And that is otherization. The Wildlings are created as an example of that, and they parallel the others, and the others are literally named after the concept of otherization. So we're not here to talk about the others. But Jon's insight about the Wildlings that, they're actually just people like us and they need to be reconciled to the Green Lands is a clue about the solution to the others. They are green men who have been exiled from the Weirwood Net and they need to be let back into the trees. And that reconciling is the only way to solve this problem of the others and the long night and whatever else. So The wildlings are a very important representation of that theme. And so the reconciliation of the wildlings to the southern lands is an act comparable to Dany's abolitionism. It's a revolutionary act. It cuts against cultural stereotypes, and it's the right thing to do. So this is why Jon and Dany are somewhat parallel figures with similar moral compasses. We can observe these two acts. So I feel strongly about this. I love Jon for this, even if he made some mistakes in how he did it. Letting the wildlings through the wall took vision, and it was the right thing to do. So, yeah. What have you to say on these things?
I think you nailed all of it. Like, these aren't monsters, they're just people, but it's because of their way of life or the way that they view life that separates them. And that's what we'll get to when we talk about like the price of freedom, of if you really want to be your own man and not, or your own person, and not have to kneel to a lord. Like, but then there becomes the question of like, how far are you willing to go to do this? And the wildlings are like the people who really do want to get off the grid, so to speak, and not have to live in, at least not have to live within society's norms, at least not the norms that have you kneeling to a lord who only got his position because of who his father was.
Right. And that's what we were talking about with them following strength, sort of self-organizing in that sort of anarchist way. Yeah, this is the price of freedom, is you can't live in the best lands. And this is where we get back to the hill tribes thing. You know, they prefer their way of life. And I think occasionally people from Westeros probably flee Westeros north of the wall and become wildlings, either because they're outlaws or they just, don't like the common law.
Yeah.
So
there's this
go ahead.
There's this, I don't know if it's I don't know if I would call it a proverb, but it's like, it's this question of like, well, how do you own all this? Oh, well, my father owned it. And how did he get it? His father owned it. And how did he get it? Oh, well, he fought for it. Well, I'll fight you for it. Like, that's like the free folks way of looking at things, of like, if you're going to lay claim to this, you need to be able to back it up for some reason, because that concept of ownership by inheritance or by right of blood, or who you're, because of family name, it's just like, no, that's not how things work up here. But then there's also the other side, which is maybe the wildlings or the free folk, maybe they were deliberately left on that side of the wall, and that comes to what is the original pact, what ends the long night. If there's an agreement between humans and the others, does that stipulate that some be left on the other's side of the line? And does that make the wildlings like a sort of cattle for them? Like, are they just like,
so we did a couple ideas there. Let me pause you. I want to comment on one thing and then the other. So first, when you're talking about basically the second point, the price of freedom, I wanted to relay my own personal experience to the wildlings, because I relate to the wildlings in a certain way. Okay, so follow me on this. The difference between wildling society and Westeros' society, one of the biggest ones, is structure and order, right? The idea of anarchism, in the best version of it, is like people don't need police and governments with monopolized violence to make them behave. And that if you leave people alone to self-govern, they'll mostly behave. And they'll come up with a way of dealing with bad actors, unless they happen to be a skin changer. But people tried to kill Varamir because he was a nasty person that was preying on people, right? So, I, as an artist, I've talked about this before. As an artist, I have a certain relationship with structure. And as an ADHD artist specifically, I abhor organizations. I've worked for myself most of my life. These things you pay a price to do that. If you want to live off the grid, if you want to live in a warehouse, if you want to live out in the woods and make your own hobbit house in the side of a hill and get solar panels and dig your own well, you can live that way, but you pay a certain price for it. There's always a trade-off, okay? There's a certain security and comfort that comes from coloring inside the lines and staying within the rules. Now, sometimes it's a false promise of security. I mean, that's another conversation. But I do think Martin, as a hippie, quote unquote, is thinking about this with the Wildlings. Like, they don't live in the best land, but they're proud of their freedom. And they're willing to pay the price because they don't have to kneel. And that's why you can't make them kneel, because to kneel is to give up their very identity, everything that they take pride in. All of a sudden, they are giving it up, and they don't even exist if they do that. And so that is why they don't really, the kneeling doesn't set in. You can make them dip their head to R'hllor or whatever, but they're going to start carving faces on trees as soon as you turn your back, right? So, yeah, I just think that's an interesting dynamic that's being commented on through the world. Do you have any thoughts on that, Tim? Or?
Yeah, because I remember years and years back, and I had to look up his name. Like, if you want to be like a modern day Richard Pronecki, and if I'm pronouncing his name correctly, but this was a guy who he was a naturalist, and he built a log cabin that he constructed himself at the shore of Twin Lakes, Alaska, hunted, fished, raised, and gathered much of his own food. And he lived like a self-sufficient life, but living off of the grid like that, living all alone like that, like that's a hard life. And you are sacrificing all of the comforts of modernity in order to do that. But so it's like, yeah, you can do that, but it's not cut out for everyone to do. And it's like, are you willing to go through all of the steps in order to make it work?
Yeah, I will just say, yeah, at Sage, it's very possible that this series will never be finished. That's a big elephant in the room that we all deal with, and we're only allowed to use friendly gallows humor about that. You can't come out with the straight depression, okay? Gallows humor, that's the key. I mean, it is what it is, bro. It is what it is. But yeah, people do discuss books and that are long since in the past, and people will never stop talking about Ice and Fire, just as they never stop talking about Lord of the Rings or Star Wars or Norse mythology or Christianity or any of that. People will talk about it forever. So it is what it is. But yeah, we know. Thank you, Erica, for gifting memberships. I saw you were trying to figure out how to do that, and I see you figured it out. So there you go. More squishers. Oh, Martin Crow and April May, couple hardcores, and Ray Blackfire, who came with a good super chat earlier. Thank you, folks. If humanity is around in 10,000 years, they'll be talking about a guy named Jesus. I promise. The story might have changed a bit, but they'll still be talking. Anyway. Oh, yes. So then your second point, Tim. The idea of the Wildlings being trapped on the wrong side of the wall. Mm-hmm. Was like, now the difference is the free folk and the kneelers and all that. But that may not have been the original difference between them. Do you think why would they have been left north of the wall? You were saying maybe as sacrifices to the others, but like, who's making that choice? And what is this group of people that some other group can control and force to stay on the north side of the wall?
Yeah, and that comes to going back to every time we discuss the idea of Azor Ahai and but as an evil Azor Ahai, willing to someone who is willing to sacrifice others for their vision of saving the world. That some of you may die, but that is a sacrifice I am willing to make. That is how I see this being pushed out, like someone making a deal on others' behalf and not giving them any say in it. It just happens. Like, we've made the decisions. I've altered the terms of the deal. Pray I do not alter them again. It's that kind of mindset that maybe, and that might be the situation that landed the free folk in the situation that they're currently in.
Yep, that makes sense. It could have been, and I think even the Maesters mentioned that, like, maybe the Wildlings were people that worshipped the others and, didn't want to be on the south side of the wall or something like that. But yeah, we can really only speculate. So it is a mystery how that happened, and also a mystery when the wall was built and how. I did a 3-hour stream with Quinn's ideas about the wall, entertaining all the different theories, and we don't have enough information really to decide. So,
yeah, there would be a dark irony in that if that is what happened, though, where it's like the free folk. Yeah, they think they're living this free lives, but little do they know they're the sacrifices. They're meant to be lambs to a slaughter in whatever this pact was millennia ago that now everyone, especially the North, has forgotten about.
Roberta is saying that Michael Talks has a good theory about this. If anyone knows which video that is, feel free to drop the link. But you can probably find that on Michael Talks About Stuff channel if you just look for it. So there you go, guys. The Last of the Giants. It's a song that is sung. Oh, there we've got cats. We got cat sign. Which cat is this?
Oh, there's Dalton. Hey, boy, come here.
The red kitten.
Yep, the red kraken. There we go.
So, let's see here. It's kind of a cute scene. Ygritte starts to sing it, and then Tormund jumps in, and Longspear Rick, and then the whole column starts singing it. Now, I do not have my singing voice today, but I will read the lyrics to the song. I am the last of the giants. My people are gone from the earth. The last of the great mountain giants who ruled all the world at my birth. Oh, the small folk have stolen my forests. They've stolen my rivers and hills. And they've built a great wall through my valleys and fished all the fish from my rills. In stone halls they burn their great fires. In stone halls they forge their sharp spears, whilst I walk alone in the mountains with no true companion but tears. They hunt me with dogs in the daylight. They hunt me with torches by night. For these men who are small can never stand tall, while giants still walk in the light. Oh, I am the last of the giants. So learn well the words of my song, for when I'm gone, the singing will fade, and the silence shall last long and long. And it says there were tears on Ygritte's cheeks when the song ended. Why are you weeping? Jon asked. It was only a song. There's hundreds of giants. I've just seen them. Oh, hundreds, she said furiously. You know nothing, Jon Snow. And so here, what is this nothing that Jon doesn't know? It's the history of Westeros, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because it's like, what is hundreds when once there were thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions perhaps? It's like they're an endangered species. They really are. And she's sad. Like it's sad the fact that you can't recognize that like this is a dying breed, and when they're gone forever.
This is one reason why I don't necessarily believe the giants helped build the wall. I think that's the kind of thing that people would assume. Like, oh, it must have been giants, But I don't think the giants would build the wall. It could be that there were different factions of giants, and we don't really even know what the purpose of the wall is. So, I guess it's possible, but I don't tend to buy that. All right, Tim. Northern areas with wildling influence. Why don't you get us started here?
All right, so we have Bear Island, and there's the Tormund Mage theory. So Mage Mormont has 5 daughters, but we don't know who the father is. We don't even know if they all have the same father. But there is a story of Tormund, Tormund Giantsbane, all of his titles. One of his titles is Husband of Bears. And he tells a story of where he supposedly had a fling with a bear. And so the theory is that maybe it's actually Tormund Giantsbane who is the father of some, if not all, of Mage Mormont's daughters. And then Mage Mormont, her daughters say like, well, Mormont women are skin changers. They skin change into bears and go looking for mates. So then the implication becomes that maybe it wasn't Tormund who claimed Mage Mormont, but actually Mage who claimed Tormund. We know that free folk wildlings will occasionally make raids, as you said, like a quick kayak from the frozen shore to make raids on Bear Island. So it's possible that during one of these raids that Tormund may have hooked up with Mage, and that Mage may have been the one who took him back home and not the other way around.
I love this theory. I want it to be true. I don't know that there's a ton of strong evidence for it. Like we were looking at Mage's kids. Mage is short and one of her kids is short. But one of her kids is 6 feet tall, and that's Daisy, who tragically dies at the Red Wedding. And we were thinking, oh, maybe Daisy is Tormund's, child. Because we don't know who the father of any of Mage's kids are. She keeps that close to the vest, I guess. And so, but it turns out Tormund is not that tall. Tormund's actually kind of short. So who knows? The theory is still alive, but the Daisy apparently is not a clue. None of them have red hair. But yeah, it's a cute idea. It could be true. Hard to say. The folk tales kind of line up. So yeah, Daisy Mormont in my headcanon is definitely cute. She was given a Morning Star for her 12th birthday, so gotta like that. Yeah, so Bear Island in general, as we said, deals with wildling raiders all the time because they're close. So they are influenced by wildling culture, as are they influenced by Ironborn culture. Now, Skagos.
Mm-hmm.
I guess we're going to get into Skagos in detail in the Rickon section, but I do want to have that attached to the Rickon Winds of Winter. So let's leave that off for now. But suffice it to say, the Skagosi are almost like wildlings. Like they are squarely in the middle of south of the wall people and north of the wall people. And only heart trees see half of what goes on Skagos, as Roose Bolton says. Okay, now the Umberlands abut the wall and the gift. So they deal with wildling raiders a lot. And the Umbers also have that sigil of the giant in chains, and they're huge, kind of shaggy people. So it's very likely if anyone is, has some giant's blood in them. The Umbers, pretty much we know that they do. And of course, Dunk might. So there are people in Westeros, with little snippets of giant's blood. The Umbers definitely have a couple of snippets, I would say. And then of course their giant is waking. He's breaking out of chains. So it makes you think of the giants waking in the earthquake stuff, which we'll talk about with Tormund. Gosh, we need to keep moving, Tim. We got a lot to cover.
Yeah.
Hour and a half already. Damn. All right. Okay. So, yeah, that's the Umbers. They're influenced by the wildlings. We mentioned the mountain clans. They are not so much influenced by the wildlings as they are wildling-like, as we discussed. The Flints and the Norries and the Wolves and all that. But they are loyal to the Starks nonetheless. They show up when they need to, and they're pretty likable when they do show up. So those mountain clans are good stuff.
And their titles too is it's not just Lord Wall, it's the Wall, the Bucket, and then they call Eddard the Ned. And just like with the Umbers, it's the Great John. It's they're so it's holding on to this old tongue. It's it almost sounds like a bad translation, but it's part of their culture, and it's what makes them so fun to read about, especially. And I also just really like Big Bucket Wall, his speech about let me die with Bolton blood burying my axe in a Bolton head with blood on my lips. Those guys are ride or die.
So Matt Folger says, they completely are. They're the most Northy of the Northmen. So Matt Folger says that Bran the Builder skin changed giants to build the wall. That is an Eldrick Stone skin theory. I think I remember him saying that. So there you go. As Bran is skin changing Hodor. There it is. Was there another one I missed? I don't think so. No. Okay. So then we have the Starks. And of course, the mountain clans, we should mention, Jon advises Stannis to not attack the Dreadfort, but rather go through the mountains, collect the clans, feast with them, do the thing, and they'll be your best fighters, and then attack Winterfell, which is exactly what he does. And they are set to make a big difference. They already are making a big difference because they know how to put bear paws on their horses, for example, so that they can walk in the snow. So they've got a lot of helpful survival tactics that Stannis' army needs.
Yeah, and Stannis' army did need that, like Jon says too, like they haven't seen a king in centuries or decades, if not centuries. And he said his father never ate so well as when he visited with the mountain clans. And up to that point, Stannis' men were starving. So that feasting came in real handy, not just for getting the mountain clans on Stannis' side, but for also keeping Stannis' men alive, not just on his side, keeping them alive. The mountain clans have done so much for them.
Yeah, I bet that roast goat tastes pretty damn good compared to snow. So, yeah, and then we have the Starks, Tim. The Starks, mostly what we want to talk about here is how the Starks and really all the northern houses we should see them as caught halfway between Southron Andal culture and Wildling culture, because the Wildlings used to be first men. And when the Andals hit town, they integrated with the first men houses to different extents in different areas. Everything south of the neck is pretty converted to Andal religion and Andal culture. It was a combination of fighting and intermarriage, or fighting and then intermarriage, but it landed in the same place, which is pretty friggin' Andalized. The Starks, obviously, up north of the neck, they don't really worship the gods of the Seven, except for the Manderleys, because they came from the south. But there are knights in some northern houses, not just the Manderleys. There's a couple others, but it's not as common. Knighthood is not as common in the north. They do sometimes go south and participate in tournaments. You know, they follow the same feudal system. They're under the rule of the Iron Throne, but they really are noticeably different. They retain a much stronger connection to First Man ways than the houses in the south, apart from Blackwood. However, when you compare a Northman to a Wildling, you get into you-know-nothing Jon Snow territory, as we said. So they are kind of right in the middle. Now, Tim, you did a good job of bringing up several instances where we can see the Starks forgetting. We can see the North not remembering. So why don't you hit a couple of these here, and I'll chime in.
So the big one is the Bale the Bard story. So Bale the Bard is a king beyond the wall, and he climbs over the wall and he makes it to Winterfell, or maybe should we save this more for when we get to the VIPs?
Yeah, the point is that the Sidgeric part.
The point is, when he introduces himself as Sidgeric of Skagos. Sidgeric is the old world tongue, the old tongue word for deceiver. So it's the fact that Lord Stark, this would be Brandon the Daughterless, doesn't pick up on that calls all this stuff, this first man thing, into question, because that's the first point is, you don't know the Starks don't speak the old tongue. They have lost track of that side of their culture. It's like, it makes me think of like second, third, fourth generation children of immigrants who no longer speak the language because they've been living in their new host country for so long. And that's how the Starks come off. Like I've said, I feel like the Starks are a lot more Andalized than they like to let on. And the big one being that they do not speak the old tongue. They only speak the common tongue. And then there's other instances of like...
Well, no, hang on. So this is part of the joke that Bale the Bard is playing on like he's teaching him a lesson, because he heard that the Lord of Stark was calling, him a craven and a raider and a thief and all this. So he sneaks down to teach him a lesson. Naming himself Sidgeric is kind of like a test. So the fact that he didn't know what it meant, you can imagine Bale the Bard having a mighty, little laugh to himself about that. Be like, ha ha, you ignorant idiot. advertising what I'm about to do, but you're too stupid to know. And then, of course, when he says, "Oh, I want the fairest flower in Winterfell," again, Lord Stark doesn't get the meaning, and he's like, "Oh, you mean a flower? Okay." And he's like, "Yeah, totally."
Yeah.
So yeah, this is a good example of the Starks forgetting. And then, yeah, so Ned executing Garrett, that's a big one, isn't it?
Yeah, because Ned executes Garrett, but he doesn't take his warning seriously. So they have forgotten about the others, this original pact. And Ned is at the point where he believes the others are just a myth. They're just a story. They're just one of old Nan's tales. It's not like when we see House of the Dragon, like Cregan Stark looking to the north as if he knows, like, something's out there. I don't know exactly what it is, but something's there. And then go back even further. Tormund Stark, the king who knelt, and then what all the kings of winter had to do before that, back when the Night's Watch wasn't just a penal colony, but was actually this high grand order that served a noble purpose. The Starks have forgotten all of that. They still hold on to that tradition. Like, it's because of the North that the Night's Watch has been able to survive as long as it has, because they're the only ones sending any quality men or money or food or anything like that. But for the most part, it's like, but if looking past the wall and guarding against the others was so important, then the Night's Watch would have never been allowed to fall into this state of disrepair. It's one thing that the Crown allowed it to happen, but the fact that the Lords of Winterfell weren't keeping tabs on either, and they weren't at the very least trying to direct the Crown's attention, like, hey, we got to keep this going. There's something important. Like, no, the Starks allowed it to fall into that same state as the rest of the kingdoms. They did all they could, but there's a question of, could they have done more? And I think they really could have, but they've forgotten that the wall serves more purpose than just keeping out wildlings. There was actually a greater danger that they should have been prepping for.
Sorry, guys. Apologies. Just got a couple PayPals. Thank you. That was from Samantha. Thank you very much. Let me just put that on vibrata. Okay. So a couple things. Yes. So Ned, we talked about this when we talked about Aegon's prophecy. How far did it go? Seems like Torrhen, probably told by Aegon. Very likely that Cregan knew because of the Pact of Ice and Fire. House of the Dragon went in that direction with Cregan, taking the others seriously. But at some point, it did break down. The watch has been deteriorating. Is it for like 100 years? Is it that long? Or is it maybe not that long? I think that's about the right time.
I think that the deterioration of the wall kind of goes hand in hand with when Aegon's prophecy is lost. It probably goes back to the Dance of the Dragons. And even when Jace does go up north of the wall to treat with Cregan, it seems like the wall is already starting to have fallen on hard times. Which is why Cregan can only give him the Greybeards. Uh-huh. He can't send him his choice men.
So that's like 170 years. So yeah, it's recently, within the last century or two. And Ned in particular, as we've talked about, seems to be having a negative reaction to Rhaegar and Lyanna having believed in prophecy and taken these drastic actions, which, were part of the turbulence and part of what caused the war and all that shit. So it seems like Ned is kind of going home to the north and wanting to forget about all of it. Like, he doesn't teach his kids politics. He doesn't check on Robert. We've talked about this. He's just trying to forget all this pain and just raise his family and tell stories by the fire and just like keep it chill. So he does not tell Jon what his parents were up to. He does not believe in the others. He executes Garrett, doesn't take his warnings seriously. When Kat talks about the others, Ned's like, they're as gone as the children of the forest, who are also not gone, of course. And then he also, as the chat has pointed out, he doesn't know why he washes his sword in the pond. It's kind of a quasi-ritual. It's a solemn practice, but he doesn't know that he's feeding blood to his son through time travel. He doesn't know that. So...
yeah, he seems to do it more out of habit. It's probably something like, well, this is what my dad used to do and his dad used to before. But yet he doesn't consciously realize, like, you're feeding blood to the weirwood. And he's definitely not doing what Bran saw in his visions in the past, where we saw a full-on sacrifice when the old woman slices the man's throat in front of the weirwood. Like, that is that kind of sacrifice, that kind of ritual as part of old god worship is not being carried out anymore, at least not south of the wall.
That's it. So this is, you can see what we mean by the North forgets. Quite simply, it's all right there. And we found this little parallel. Jon wasn't told the story of Bale the Bard, and Ygritte's like, really? You don't know the story? It reminds us of when Jojen and Amira are telling the Night of the Laughing Tree story, which is Lyanna's story, to Bran. And they're like, you don't know this story? Really? So the current Starks are they have the least knowledge of history of any Starks. Ned did not tell them about the war or about the others or any of the scary stuff, so.
Yeah. And
all right, let's dive into Wildling history. Let's speed run this. I want to get to the characters.
Okay.
And also Rick and God. Okay. Chop, Tim. Let's go. No Blackfires. No Squishers. No, we are going to talk about the Blackfires. There's a parallel. It's legit. I approved it already. Wildling history. Okay. This is mostly about kings beyond the wall. So Joramun was the first one, right, Tim? Tell us about Joramun.
So first king beyond the wall teams up with Brandon the Breaker to take down Night's King. He founds the Horde of Winter, which is said to woke giants from the earth, which we've sort of dawned on probably is more like a metaphor for earthquakes, if anything, some kind of cataclysm, because of the whole idea that the Horde of Winter will cause the wall to break and fall. That sounds like an earth. If not calling down a comet to hit it, then causing an earthquake to rumble beneath it.
I'm just going to restrain myself. I've got many things to say about horns and earthquakes and waking giants, but I'm only going to okay. I'm going to say a couple things real quick. So the name Joramun, clearly taken from Jormungandr of Norse mythology. Jormungandr's the world's serpent. And when he looses his tail at Ragnarok, the world shakes, and that begins, a lot of things begin Ragnarok, but that's one of the things. So now we have the Horn of Joramun, which might bring down the wall, and trigger apocalyptic events. And it might be part of the Night's King story because Joramun teamed up with Brandon the Breaker to take down the Night's King. So without going into depth about all my theories about all that, you can see how all this stuff is related. When we get into the etymology of Tormund, we're going to see that is similar to Joramun as well. So more to come on the Horn of Winter and stuff, but it is no coincidence that Joramun, we should probably say, sounds like Jormungandr. That is, and then he's got this horn that looks like a dragon's horn. That's the other part. The horn of Joramun, the one that Mance produces, looks like a dragon horn, dragon binder, and Joramun is, Norse serpents and dragons are the same thing. So there you go. That was pretty short. I restrained myself, didn't I, Sean? Shout out to Hero with 1,000 Faces in the chat. So Gendel and Gorn, Tim, tell us about them.
Gendel and Gorn, brothers, they share the title of King Beyond the Wall. They invaded 3,000 years ago by digging a tunnel under the wall. During their invasion, Gorn killed the Stark King of Winter. He was then in turn killed by that king's son, who was then raised to be the new King of Winter. His brother Gendel escapes, or possibly is killed. But according to Ygritte, the Wildling story is that Gendel and his followers were able to escape and make it back to the tunnel, but they got lost along the way. And the story is that Gendel and his children, or Gendel and his followers lived down there, had children, and those children, or the ghosts of these people, are still down in that tunnel haunting it.
Also, Tim, if you need to take a bathroom break, feel free. I did the last time I disappeared, so I didn't announce it, but I don't mean to keep you chained to the desk. I always forget to give my guests permission But yeah, if you need to, just let me know. We understand you've been drinking all that shade of the evening from your horn helmet. So let's see here. Okay. So the interesting thing about Gendel and Gorn is that it probably ties to Beowulf, right? Grendel. Because Grendel's a monster that lives in a cavern or something, but it's really the brother of Beowulf, I think. And so it's a story about, I don't know Beowulf, but I believe
I've
that's
never
correct.
heard that take on Beowulf.
What is it?
I've never heard that take on Beowulf, that Grendel was related to him. I know he fights Grendel, then he fights Grendel's mother, and then in his old age, he fights the dragon. Those are the three major parts of Beowulf.
But Grendel has been transformed. Doesn't Grendel have some, like, descended from Cain? Okay. So, all right. So it's the same theme. It's the other. It's the otherized. Thank you, Tim. Yes, your knowledge of Beowulf. I don't know Beowulf, like I said. The point is, though, that like when Beowulf fights Grendel, that is in a way the exiled race of man, that he's the beast, you know, the id, the shadow part, the dark part of our subconscious, all that kind of stuff. So it's similar to this whole theme with the wildlings and the otherization and stuff like that. So I've got a whole book about Beowulf that I need to read, actually. So this will be a reminder. It's a modern comparative mythology analysis of Beowulf, and I actually really want to read it.
I'm surprised you've never read Beowulf.
There's a lot of mythology out there, Tim. There really is.
I know. We can't cover it all. We're only two people.
Well, in all seriousness, though, you know, future of the channel stuff, I am going to get back to mythic concepts soon. I am in the process of, I don't even want to say it, freeing myself up time to work on mythic concepts. I will just say that. It is coming. So I will be spending more time researching mythology soon. But yes, obviously Gendel and Grendel are similar names. So these wildlings that invade, they're the outsiders. And now Gendel's children live down in the caverns, and they're always hungry. They're monsters down there waiting to get you, right? So, yeah, Stephanie is saying that Beowulf is one of those stories where there's an original pagan story and then there's layers of Christianized symbolism on top. Yeah. That's the same as most Norse mythology. So, yeah, pretty much all Norse mythology is like that. So that does not surprise me. And it's the Norse, Germanic, British mythology. There's all those layers to it. You know, there's always a heavy Christianization to all that European folklore, really, I guess is the better way to say it.
The translators took heavy liberties with Beowulf.
Grendel is from Misty Moor, just like Kyle the Cat says here with 1,000 Faces. So there's another Beowulf shout out. That's cool. That's cool. Yeah, and thank you for the kind words about some of my mythic videos. Appreciate that. So that's Gendel and Gorn. They're still down there, maybe. I think the major point of the story for Ice and Fire, besides the theme work, is that there may be more passages down there. Lots of caverns under the wall, not just that cave at the Night Fort. So when Bran and Mira get in a boat on that river down in Bloodraven's cave, and we sail all the way back under the wall, we're going to know, like, oh, yeah, there's this huge cave system down there. I think it's just another clue about that. Me and Jackson Crawford hate the word Germanic. What's the newer word, Martin Crow? Is that an outdated word? It's definitely an overgeneralized term, so I get that. But yeah, it's probably not important for what we're talking about today. But let me know if there is a newer term. There is no newer word. Well, then what's the point of getting rid of a word if you don't have a new word? I guess the point is to be more specific, but it's kind of like saying Native American. And it's like, well, which tribe are you talking about? You know, like they're not.
Umbrella.
Yeah. So.
Umbrella terms.
Okay, so the Horned Lord. As I said, the Horned Lord is interesting because he seems to be some kind of reference to green men. And it is him that gave the famous saying that Dalla recites to Jon, sorcery is like a sword without a hilt, there's no safe way to grasp it. So, and then of course the counterpunch to that is, well, in the middle of a fight, it's better to have a sword without a hilt than no sword at all. So, Jon's going to be wielding Lightbringer, for better or worse, I guess. There's not anything else to say. He used magic to pass the wall. That's all we know, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just one of these unwritten histories. But next is the big, Bale the Bard. So here we go. Famous Raider musician and womanizer disguised himself as Sigeric of Skagos, which we said means deceiver, snuck into Winterfell. He entertains the Lord Stark, who would be Lord Brandon Stark, who later becomes known as Brandon the Daughterless because of what happens. When he wants to offer Bale a reward for his entertainment, he requests the fairest flower in Winterfell. To which Brandon, again, just like he didn't pick up on the old tongue word, doesn't pick up on the metaphor. He thinks he literally means a flower, and he gets him one of the blue winter roses. But it turns out, no, he was talking about Brandon's daughter, his only child, his only heir. He sneaks off with her when the next morning, all that's left in her bed is the blue rose that he presented her with. Brandon gets the help of the Night's Watch because he believes that Bale took her back over the wall, but it turns out no, they had actually been hiding in the crypts beneath them, in the crypts of Winterfell the whole time. She is found with a child. This is Bale the Bard's child. Years and years later, though, Bale invades the north and he has to fight his own son. He can't bring himself to do it. Instead, he is slain by his son, and this half wildling son of the king beyond the wall then grows up to become the next Lord Stark.
And that last part is the least believable part of it to me. The whole thing, I mean, George Martin probably couldn't say if it's true or not. It's a fable. He doesn't decide the truth of that. The point is the symbolic pattern and the color that the folktale adds to the story. Those are the 2 points. So in terms of what does it say about the story? Well, Ygritte tells us at the end of the story, she says, so you and I are kin, Jon Snow. Like, it's again, what is Jon not, when Ygritte says, you know nothing, what is the nothing that he doesn't know? It's the common shared history of the Wildlings and the First Men. So it's the same thing here. She's like, you know nothing, we're kin. We're like, you've got Bale's blood in you, same as me. So yeah, I mean, it's just over and over, same idea. It's George telling, this is how George gives us his hippie message, basically. Like, he gives us Ygritte and Jon freezing north of the wall with this barbaric army that's very strange at first. But at the bottom of it, it's just that same message. Like, hey, we're all human. We have shared history, and we really should see the commonality in each other instead of seeing the differences and killing each other. It's pretty straightforward hippie message right there. So, yeah.
And of course, there's all of the Rhaegar Lyanna tie-ins that it's supposed to make you think about in the current story. Because again, that line, you know nothing, Jon Snow, it's related to, it's like, it's not just the things that Ygritte's saying you don't know your own culture, you don't know that you share bloodlines with some of us because we're all just people. But then of course there is the underlying notion of you don't know your own heritage because you don't know who your mother is and who your father is and who you really are. You're not Jon Snow, you're a Targaryen prince.
So if I could just real quickly address the Tolkien chat. Someone has pointed out that a lot of Smaug and the Golden Horde and all that Golden Dragon Horde mythology is from Norse mythology and from Beowulf. Tolkien is definitely very inspired by Beowulf. The Arkenstone is just in the movie. In the books, it's a gold cup that Bilbo originally steals from the Horde to show that he has been there. So yeah, there's no Arkenstone in the books, but it works much the same. In any case, it's a MacGuffin. That's the point. So yeah, so okay, thank you for adding the Rhaegar and Lyanna angle. That is probably the main point, really, of the
Mhm.
Bale the Bar story. Besides the theme work, is to help us figure out RLJ, and of course, I
Mhm.
talked about that in my two. Oh, there is an Arkenstone. It's just not as important. Okay, well there you go. Um, there you go. So the point is that, yeah, if you want more about the RLJ stuff, I have two recent RLJ videos: RLJ, A Love Story, and RLJ, A Secret Wedding. And I think I talked about Bale the Bard in both of them, but you should watch both of them. So there you go. Then we've got, oh, yes, the
Raymond.
symbolic implications, of course, would be knights, queen, and king stuff. And this is where we get back to the deceiver. So the chat was saying, oh, Satan means deceiver. I think that is more like a nickname or like a title. I don't know that it means that, but Satan is called the deceiver, and that is what George is thinking about when he's talking about Bale as the deceiver, because all the Bale characters are Knights King characters, like Peter Baelish, Bale the Bard, Baelor Targaryen, who makes the white marble sept and burns the books like it's like burning the weirwood net. It's You know how George does it with his mythology. If he notices commonalities, he does a mashup. So there's Baelor of the Evil Eye from Irish folklore. And he is, as you might guess, he has the evil eye. He is an antagonist figure to Lug, his grandson, who is the hero. And there's a lot of Lug and Baelor stuff going on. But the point is that when you see the name Bale in Ice and Fire, think about Night's King. So, for example, Littlefinger, he is a bard, and he is not a bard, but he has Marillion, who is the bard, and his name is Peter Baelish. So you've got the bard and the Bale in his story, and then he steals / rescues Sansa. Rhaegar abducts Lyanna, okay, and Rhaegar is a bard. He's not named Bale, but his ancestor is named Baelor, and he's a bard. And then you've got, yeah, so there's a whole pattern with it. And that's why Bale the Bard takes the nickname Deceiver, because, yeah, these are all devil characters, if you will. They're trickster, devil figures. So Peter Baelish is the worst version of it. Rhaegar is probably the best version of it. And Bale the Bard is like somewhere in the middle. So, yeah. Oh, Balerion. Yeah, so Balerion the Black Dread. How is he a devil character? Well, I mean, think about it. His name is the Long Night, Balerion the Black Dread. His wings shadow the earth. Like,
yeah. And of course, it's the daughter of a Stark Lord running off with an otherized king, because in here, Bale the Bard, King Beyond the Wall, but then with Lyanna and Rhaegar, while the Targaryens represent dragons and fire, but with the pale skin and the silver white hair and the purple eyes, they are like off-color others. And she runs off, and of course, they're Valyrian. They're not Westerosi. They're, even though they've been there for centuries, there still is that bit of foreignness to them that makes them so different and so godlike. So, yeah, the daughter of the only daughter of the Stark Lord running off with an otherized king is how I would say it.
Yep, it's a long pattern. And check out my Blood of the Other podcast series if you want to go deep on that stuff. It's just podcast put on YouTube. There's no pictures, but definitely it will go deep on the whole Bale the Bard mythology and the Baelor stuff and all that. So yeah, I should go back to that sometime. Yeah, there's Balin and Balan too. I went into that, Sean, in that Blood of the Other series. I talked about all that as well. George it's kind of nerdy and funny, but it's very skillful. Like, he's just like, wait, I can combine these myths that both have a similar name and some common themes and just do a mashup. Like Ig, as we've talked about, there is a Lovecraftian old one called Ig, the father of serpents, and then there's Yggdrasil, and so Yggdrasil happens to have a bunch of snakes under it too, and so George has combined those ideas because they're naturally compatible and they're naturally similar. So, anyways, Lug is pronounced Lu. In Irish, the H following a consonant makes the consonant silent. Lug. Lug. No, it's just Lu. Cool. He's the war. He is associated with light. I don't know if his name means light, but yeah. Anyways, plenty of edits for Mickey here on the cleanup. This will be a fun stream to clean up and re-release in 6 months, though. I'd put, because we've got pictures for all of these Wildling clans and stuff. I just wasn't going to be able to like integrate all the pictures and all these notes at the same time. So, yeah, Lu is the Lord of Light. That's what I thought. Yeah. Okay, so we are down to Raymond Redbeard. Oh, I just wanted to say, I was skeptical of the last part of the Bale the Bard story because why would he invade the Greenlands if he knew his son was the Lord of Winterfell?
Mm-hmm.
That's just asking for exactly what he got, which was coming up against his son in battle. It doesn't make sense. So that part to me sounds like a story invention.
Yeah. Plus, there's the whole thing about that would be a bastard born Stark. Then he would be a Snow, if anything, being raised to Lord Stark. So it's like, does Brandon not have any brothers or nephews who are going to contest that? Like, there's a lot that needs explanation in that whole story.
You know what I might guess, actually, if I were a historian, I would say that this is a collapsed timeline. There was probably a king beyond the wall who did have a child with a maid of Winterfell, and there was a Bale the Bard who invaded the lands. And perhaps there was something in the Bale the Bard story about knowing that the Stark he was facing, he was distantly related to. And then later it got collapsed into one story where it's all happening in one generation. That does happen with like mythicized history, is that different kings or people with the same name are collapsed into one. And it's like, how many Durans were there?
Yeah, I was about to say the same thing. When people have the same name, it's like, are we sure we're talking about the same one? Who knows?
We don't know. And George loves to play with that. So it's probably something like that. Raymond Redbeard. So he gathered the Wildlings together. For some reason, we have two different dates. In 212 AC, and then he invaded 14 years later. So, two-step process. He was defeated by Starks and Umbers at a battle at Long Lake. This might have been the most serious Wildling incursion into the south. They made it pretty far. They surprised the Watch. The Lord Commander was called Sleepy Jack Musgood because he was asleep at his post and let the Wildlings get by the wall and get way past it. One Lord Stark was killed, Willem Stark, but his brother Artos the Implacable then slew Raymond. He made the Night's Watch bury the dead because they got to the battle late because of sleepy Lord Commander Jack Musgood. So there's a whole story there. And Raymond Redbeard's cowardly brother fled the battle, and he was called either the Red Raven or the Red Craven thereafter. And we'll mention him in the future with Kingsblood. But yeah, that's our Wildling history. Go ahead.
So I do have an idea on the dates. I think this is supposed to contrast with Mance Rayder. So I think what they're saying is that he began gathering the Wildlings up in 212, but he wasn't able to launch his invasion in 226. I think that's supposed to be a commentary on how long it took for him to get all of these guys on the same page. So then we're supposed to look at Mance doing the same thing, getting all these people who hate each other into one common cause in a fraction of that time. That is supposed, I guess that's more of a commentary on this is how much of a charismatic, great leader Mance Rayder is, because look how long it took the last king beyond the wall to gather up his forces.
That's a great point. That's exactly the reason we have that detail, is so that we can appreciate what Mance did, which we're about to talk about. So, VIPs, Wildling VIPs, you guys are invited to the after party. Nah, this is the after party. You know, you all are invited. So, Discord is like the after party. This is the party. So again, if you want to join Discord, you can either join as a Patreon squisher with the join button right below me, or you can join Patreon. Either way, get into the Discord, and then you'll be a real VIP. Anyway, Osha the Wildling is our first very important wildling. I guess VIW it would be. Because we meet her first. She tries to rob Bran with some other scrawny, ill-fed wildlings. They have fled south of the wall because they don't want anything to do with Mance or the others. And they're just kind of like, let's get the hell out of here. And so they're kind of desperate. And what this does is it introduces us to several things. The fact that the wildlings exist, the fact that they are a second-class citizen. It introduces us to this Mance Rayder fellow, and that at least some people are afraid of the others. So we've now got Garrett turning up afraid of the others, and these other wildlings turning up afraid of the others. So we obviously already know the others are real because we saw them in the prologue, but we can see that, like, this is, you know, repeated warnings that the Starks are getting that they're not really picking up on, right?
Yeah. Yeah, so, like, Osha is, again, our introduction to wildlings, to see that, like, they are just people, and it's telling, like, look, what that guy said to your dad, he was telling the truth. Like, there's some scary things going on up north, and you should be running south as far as and as fast as you can.
Yeah, that line she has about Robb marching the wrong way is super poignant on, like, your first reread, when you really appreciate, like, how much it is wrong for the Starks to go south of the neck and how bad it goes every time, basically, except for Cregan. He's the one, because he went down, killed some people, and went right back north. That's how you do it. You know, don't linger. Anyway, so yeah, it's a poignant line. He's marching the wrong way, and Bran's like, I tried to tell him. And that's cute. And that's the other thing that Osha does, is she influences Bran early in the story to have faith in the old gods. She talks about the rustling of the weirwood leaves, which that's a true folkloric belief that Osha has. From that's a wildling belief, essentially, is what that means, is that the rustling of the leaves is the old gods of the weirwood trying to communicate. The rustling of the weirwood weaves. It's very, very important. So, yeah, and so we can tell that Bran kind of believes Osha, and he tries to tell Robb, you know, but Robb doesn't understand. So, yeah, very sad, poetic, and it just shows you how how there's this, again, even before Jon Snow's plotline, there's truths that the wildlings know that you Kneelers have forgotten, as Dallas says. And then, of course, Osha is now guarding Rickon on Skagos. And she will be important in the plots to come. We're going to come back to Osha when we talk Rickon here at the end. So let's move on for now. But she is our first wildling VIP. Then we have Craster. I can't call him a VIP. He's just like the worst person in the world, like Keith Olbermann style. Craster, he was a villains tournament finalist or a quarter finalist or something. So,
yeah. But again, it's going to this idea of, well, the wildlings are just people. They have their good ones, but they also have their bad ones. And Craster is like some of the worst that wildling culture could have to offer. And first, the fact that we've said, like, wildlings, the free folk, are not into the whole incest thing. Like, if anything, they try and make their marriages be as distant as possible, almost. But Craster, it's not just incest; it's his own daughters, which adds, like, we can kind of come to terms with Targaryen incest, but what Craster's doing adds a whole other level of squick to it.
Tim, I just want to say, speak for yourself on that real quick. I'm kidding. You're fine. Safe space. We all get it. Anyway, so yeah, we don't need to belabor Craster, but the facts about him, he gives his sons to the others. And it's possible that other people do that too. So he's showing us that some wildlings do this. He's also showing us something about Knights, King, and Queen. You know, giving their children to the others or turning them into others. We know that his mother is from White Tree, where we find the baby sacrificed in the tree. And I've got a whole theory about that, Secret of White Tree. So check out that video. His father is a crow, just like Mance Rayder. His father is a Night's Watchman. Mm-hmm. And his mother is a wildling. So this is another, when wildling culture and Night's Watch culture meet, it might get a Mance Rayder or you might get a Craster. Mm-hmm. And so Craster is this uneasy ally of the Night's Watch, where obviously he's despised, but in the same way that Craster has this uneasy alliance with the others, he trades information and goods to the Night's Watch. And that gives him power and special privilege over the other wildlings, which is one of the reasons why the other wildlings hate him. He is reviled by the other wildlings. And by his wives, and pretty much everyone hates Craster. So
yeah. You're supposed to hate Craster.
There it is.
And of course, because he's playing both sides by having the relationship with the Watch that he does, but also keeping even though he doesn't join Mance Rayder, he's still keeping a foot in that camp. So he's a fence sitter, and nobody likes a fence sitter.
And there are I used to know somebody called Sweet Sunray, who has a blog you can find on WordPress, Sweet Sunray of Ice and Fire, I think it is, or something like that. And she has a whole theory about Craster, like being the one to stage those two bodies of Othor and Jafer Flowers so that the Night's Watch would find them near the Grove of Nine. It's either the others did that or Craster did it, but she thinks that like Craster's feeding information to the others, that there's some means of communication, and that like he's trapping Night's Watchmen. He may have killed Benjen. The Night's Watchman may have eaten Benjen already in those sausages. Those black-blooded sausages may very well be dead Night's Watchmen down in the larder. So there are some crazy theories about Craster being a little more active than you would think that are pretty friggin' interesting. It's been a long time since I've read him, but very credible. Sweet Sunray is very intelligent. So check out that blog. And Sean, I don't know if one of you or my other mods can find Sweet Sunray's Craster sausages theory, and drop the link in the chat. But it's a pretty tasty one. So, yeah. Anyway, Mance Rayder. Let's talk about happier things. Mm-hmm. Mance Rayder. He, like we said, he is also, his father was a watchman. And what happened was he was, not only was his father was a watchman, but when the watch was north of the wall, they fought with some wildlings, or they came upon a village that was, everyone had been killed but Mance. So let me look it up real quick. But basically, Mance was adopted.
Yeah, he was orphaned and adopted by the Night's Watch. After a group of raiders were put to the sword when Mance was a child, he was taken by the Night's Watch and raised as one of them.
There you go. And so Mance is just, more than any character perhaps, caught in between the Watch and the Wildlings. So then he's raised among the Watch. He's got the blood of the Watch and the Wildlings. He spent some of his childhood as a Wildling. Now he's growing up as a Night's Watchman, just a couple years, but And then, of course, there comes this story where Mance Rayder was attacked by a shadow cat and saved by a wildling woods witch. This is on a ranging, because he's a ranger at the Shadow Tower. He's ideal to be a ranger because he knows he has connections, right? Like he's more likely to be able to talk to wildlings and get information from them. They nicknamed him Rayder because he was taken from the wildlings. So that's why his name is so straightforward. Like, you first read the book, you're like, really? The chief wildling raider is called Mance Rayder? But no, he's named that by the Watch because he was taken from the wildlings. So he is saved by this woods witch from the shadow. He's got severe wounds from the shadow cat. They're like snow mountain lions or snow leopards or something like that. And so she sews up his cloak with this red silk from a shy that washed up on a shipwreck. It's a very valuable thing, the most valuable thing that she had, and she used it to sew up his cloak. So it's this very meaningful thing to Mance Rayder. But when he gets back to Eastwatch by the sea, what happens, Tim?
They make him turn. They tell him he can't keep it. He has to turn it in and don it with a replacement cloak, and that becomes his breaking point. The fact that he can't keep just this little heirloom from what he got, that they're going to make him give it up and go back to his plain colors, as like he sees that as an insult to his freedom. Like, no, this was a gift given to me. What do you mean I can't keep it?
And there you go. The link to that Sweet Sunray essay is in the chat. Thank you, Sean. So it represents all the freedom that is denied to the men of the Watch. And the fact that Mance has tasted a little bit. He likes the Wildling music and the Wildling women, especially the one that saved his life. And the idea that a Woods Witch saved the life of a filthy Night's Watch crow with her most, it moved him.
Yeah.
And it changed him, just as Jon's experience with the Wildlings changes him. And so he leaves the Watch and becomes this Wildling. Now, we should say that while Mance Rayder was a ranger of the Shadow Tower, he went with Lord Commander Corgyle, to Winterfell when Robb and Jon were young. So this is before Mormont took over the Watch, and the previous Lord Commander. So Robb and Jon were kids. Mance Rayder caught them committing a prank and promised not to tell on them. So it's this funny story that he has to tell Jon, that he's been there twice and met Jon twice. And of course, the second time, Tim, was when Mance was Mance Rayder. And he climbed the wall and went to Winterfell to take the measure of King Robert because he heard that King Robert was visiting. And that's how good Mance Rayder's intel is. He heard that King Robert was coming and had time to climb the wall and journey all the way to Winterfell and pose as this bard, right? Abel. We don't know what name he used then, but maybe it was Abel. Who knows? And then, of course, he repeats that as Abel in Dance with Dragons. And we did a whole Mance Rayder character stream, so I don't want to go into everything about his story. He's possibly my favorite character. I was saying to Tim before the stream. I mean, why don't you read this quote here about how he unified the North? Read the first one. I'll read the second one, and then we'll talk about that.
All right. Mance had spent years assembling this vast, plotting host, talking to this clan mother and that Magnar, winning one village with sweet words and another with a song and a third with the edge of his sword, making peace between Harma Dogshead and the Lord of Bones, between the Hornfoots and the Night Runners, between the Walrus men of the Frozen Shore and the cannibal clans of the Great Ice Rivers, hammering 100 different daggers into one great spear, aimed at the heart of the Seven Kingdoms. He had no crown nor scepter, nor robes of silk and velvet, but it was plain to Jon that Mance Rayder was a king in more than name.
So this is just showing you his skill, right? And then the second quote is more the same. I've never had a crown on my head or sat my arse on a bloody throne, if that's what you're asking, Mance replied. My birth is as low as a man's can get. No septons ever smeared my head with oils, which means he's never knighted. I don't own any castles, and my queen wears fur and amber, not silk and sapphires. I am my own champion, my own fool, and my own harpist. You don't become king beyond the wall because your father was. The free folk won't follow a name, and they don't care which brother was born first. They follow fighters. When I left the Shadow Tower, there were 5 men making noises about how they might be the stuff of kings. Tormund was one, the Magnar another. The other 3 I slew, when they made plain they'd sooner fight than follow. So we know why Mance is trying to unify the Wildlings, and we know what his argument is. He's like, look, you've had people killed by the others too. The only way we're going to survive this is by unifying, heading south, and getting through the wall. That's his argument. And so he's making this argument to people, and if they won't listen, he pulls out his sword and he duels. And we know that when Jon fought him, glamored as the Lord of Bones, Mance gave it to him pretty good. He's a better swordsman than Jon. We know that. He whooped him, so yeah. And that's with the encumbrance of the illusion on him too. So yeah, Mance is very skilled. He's a skilled negotiator. He's a skilled fighter. And he used all these skills to unify the North, as you pointed out, in much less time than Raymond Redbeard, the previous most successful king beyond the wall.
Yeah, and that's the thing, because like the union of wildlings only lasts less than a generation, because it only lasts one's lifetime. It takes all this time to gather them, to get them on the same side, and it only lasts as long as that particular king beyond the wall can live and lead. Once he's gone, the entire thing falls apart, because it doesn't matter if he has a son or sons or anything like that. Nothing's going to pass to them. Once that king dies, the whole thing falls apart, and then it's up to the next person to come forward, the next strong, charismatic leader who can gather it all up again. And that's when you try again.
And yet, Jon seems to have a reasonable amount of swordsman skill. Like, he's not a born savant like Jaime, but he's pretty good. So good, not great, and also young and gaining experience. That seems to be where, like, he held his own for a little bit with Mance before he got whooped. And he gave it to Iron Emmett pretty good once he had the battle rage descend on him. And Iron Emmett, we know, is a good swordsman. So Jon's no slouch. But Mance Rayder is probably, one tier below prime Jaime, let's say. He's pretty high up there. So, and we are going to do a tournament of fighters sometime. That idea is not lost. It's on the list. We're definitely going to do that. That will be fun. So, Ygritte. She is Juliet of the Free Folk, as I talked about in my RLJ videos. A love story, RLJ Secret Wedding. It's a Romeo and Juliet thing, with the key thing being like Romeo and Juliet's families were at odds. And so we have Ygritte and Jon being from these warring factions, and Jon has to betray Ygritte and leave the Wildlings to be loyal to the Watch, and he's torn between them. Rhaegar and Lyanna, same thing. Their families ended up at war. So yeah, it's a Romeo and Juliet thing. We know that Ygritte is considered lucky because she's kissed by fire. She's a spear wife. So, Jon looks at her and like, yeah, she's not maybe as beautiful as some that I've seen, but like, she gets more beautiful to him over time, kind of. And he even says that, like, oh, this flaw that I thought was a flaw is actually endearing. And so, she's about 19, a couple years older than Jon. And let's see, Tormund advises Jon to get with her. He's like, hey, that's a pretty good catch there. And Jon's like, well, but I might have a bastard. And Tormund's like, and if you do, great. More the better. Another strong son for the Wildlings. So this is where we know that, like, you can call Ygritte a cougar if you want. That's the joke. This is where we know that Wildlings don't have any shame on bastards. They're like, yeah, married or not, whatever. You guys are both young and virile. You should bang and have some kids. Why not? So
yeah, because they look at kids as like, look, man, we're lucky. Even it doesn't matter if it's a bastard. We're gonna be lucky if this kid lives past 2. Like, they don't even give them names when they're born. That's why Varamir is Lump for a couple of years.
Sword of the Evening says we call cougars shadow cats north of the wall. That's really funny. That's what it would be. Yeah. She's a shadow cat. That's funny. Okay. But yes, you're right. And that is it's survival of the species in the tribe. Exactly. Ion is valued above these, norms about, virginity and sanctity of marriage and all that stuff. So that's obviously a contrast. And it's very poignant for Jon because he's carrying around this shame of being a bastard. Yeah. And Tormund's like, who cares? So this is a very important moment of cognitive dissonance for Jon, being like, you mean all this is arbitrary?
Yes, Jon, because we're more concerned with the high infant mortality rate right now.
Yeah.
It's like that's the line separating them.
So she's essentially trying to teach Jon because she sees the good in him. She's like, yeah, this might be a decent husband here. I just need to round off the sharp edges and teach him a couple things, but good kid, good looking, cares a lot, passionate. He's tough. He spared my life, et cetera, et cetera. And so she stands up to Rattleshirt very bravely and saves Jon's life after Jon spared her life. So this begins their relationship, and it begins Jon's ability to sort of empathize with the otherized group of people, and it's returned to him. So this is something similar to Mance, right? Mance was changed seemingly by the kindness of this wildling woman, wise woman or wood witch, whichever you prefer, who saved his life. And Ygritte is touched by Jon's mercy, and then Jon is further touched by Ygritte standing up for him. So this is how we counteract the divisions of hate and killing. This is how we do reconciliation. It begins with empathy and acts of courage and sacrifice and things like that. So this is all just central to the theme work of the story, I guess is my point with Ygritte and Jon. And so, yeah, they should have stayed in the cave, right?
Mm-hmm. Never should have left.
Yeah, unfortunately, she's killed at Castle Black. Jon finds her with the arrow. They have a last moment together, and then she dies. It's just tragic romance all over the place.
And then, even though he didn't kill her in his dreams, he always does.
Right, exactly. And we see that in the Azor Ahai dream. So here we come. Tormund Giantsbane. He's got a few titles, doesn't he, Tim?
Before you stands Tormund Giantsbane, Tall Talker, Horn Blower, and Breaker of Ice. And here also Tormund Thunderfist, Husband to Bears, the Mead King of Ruddy Hall, Speaker to Gods, and Father of Hosts. And
so there's a lot to unpack here. It's a lot of symbolism. There's some references to mythology. Tormund Thunderfist highlights the similarity between Tormund and Thor. Thunderfist, Thor is a storm god. And of course, Tormund is mostly tied to horns. And a lot of his names have to do with things about the horn of Joramun. So he's the horn blower, the breaker of ice. Breaker of Ice, Thunderfist, these are world calamity titles. And of course, when Jormungandr releases his tale, Ragnarok begins. There will be ice and fire disasters. Shout out to Norse mythology and the Robert Frost poem. We're going to see both. And so we see that here. There's Icebreaker. He is speaker to gods. Speaking to the gods is similar to waking giants in the earth here. So yeah, this is all apocalyptic horn stuff. Mead King of Ruddy Hall is like Norse mead of poetry reference. I don't want to get lost on the mead of poetry because I have a lot to say about it, and we need to keep the stream moving. But it's definitely a lot of Norse mythology here.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, the point is, it's not just that Tormund tells tall tales. He is a tall tale. The man is a living legend. Like that is the emphasis that George is trying to make by making Tormund out to be like this, such a grandiose character with all of these titles. But then when we meet him, he's just like this big, lovable goof.
He is very funny, but he's also perceptive and wise. He's a very lovable character, and he's another character that Jon forms a strong connection to. So at times, him and Tormund have harsher words, but mostly a lot of mutual respect and friendship. So Tormund could be another key figure in help reconciling the Wildlings and the Greenlanders, if you will, Westeros.
Because Jon's story is picking up like this long trail of surrogate father figures. It starts with Ned, since Ned's not his real dad, but his uncle. But again, it's like he may have been, that line, like, he may have been your father, but he wasn't your daddy. But then Jon picks some more, like Jeor Mormont becomes a father figure, Mance becomes a father figure, and Tormund is also in there. Like, just these guys who give him this kind of advice that you would expect from the father that he never really had.
Yes, I was distracted by Sean's naughty implications in the chat. Because, of course, winding the horn, blowing the horn, if you will, is a symbolic parallel to Nissanissa's scream. When Dragonbinder lets out a scream, it's like a scream that fills the world. So, yeah, making Nissanissa scream and blowing the horn are the same things. So there's obviously an act of the Azor High myth that is describing the creation of a child, and I will let y'all fill in the blanks from there. So Lord's Kiss, winding the horn. Same thing. Anyway.
And Tormund is all body tales. The tale of the knight with the bear, the knight with the giant, his golden ring and where he wears it that we're not allowed to say or YouTube will cry.
It's a sea ring.
It's all body tales.
Yes. So let's get into the names here. So he is claimed to have slept with both a giantess and a she-bear, and his name's all about the horn. So look, this is probably one of the best phonetic names in Ice and Fire, and it really shows how George... Yeah, Tormund says that his sea ring would fall off and not like these tiny things. Stop, you guys. You're distracting me. All right, so look. Tor means high, craggy hill. And Mond, there's a couple different definitions we can get. Mund can mean hand or mouth. And Mundi means world, as in the Axis Mundi. Okay? So when we talk about the mouth of a hill or a hill that's like a hand, a hill that's like a hand is the fist of the first men, where Jon found a horn that might be the horn of Jormungand. Okay, just getting started. And then the idea of the mouth, this makes you think of the Weirwood mouth, which is actually a cave mouth and an entrance to north of the wall. Because the Axis Mundi is the key thing here. The Axis Mundi, yeah, we mentioned Thor already. Sean, pay attention. We mentioned Thor. We're moving on now. The Axis Mundi is important. It's because that is just to explain, this is a very important mythical archetype. It is, if you're standing on Earth and you look up at the North Star, and you draw a line between yourself and the North Star, the canopy of stars appears to be rotating around the fixed point of the North Star. So you could imagine a pillar upon which everything is connected and spinning, okay? And people have imagined that pillar. That's the idea of the world tree. The world tree is this axis that goes from the Earth to the North Star. So can be perceived as a pillar. It can be perceived as a tree. It can be a mountain. It can be a whirlpool. All the navel stone, omphalos ideas, which you see around the world, it's the same idea. This is all this cosmic axis mundi stuff. Very important to the ancients. It's just something you notice when you look at the sky. It's just a thing. So now, in Ice and Fire, the North Star is called the Eye of the Ice Dragon. It could be the Eye of the Rider or the Eye of the Ice Dragon. But the point is, it's in here. George is thinking about the cosmic axis. He's thinking about the world tree. He's thinking about the North Star. And the reason why this is important is because when you talk about a world cataclysm, the world shaking, it's frequently described as the world being thrown off its axis. Okay, so when you talk about a horn that wakes the giants in the earth, that brings down the wall, that might summon a comet, that begins Ragnarok, we are shaking the axis of the earth. And that is why the Ice Dragon is a part of this. This is all like the coming of the Night King, the coming of winter, when the earth is thrown off its axis. And so we see the name Aemond, for example. You knew I was going to get into this, Tim. So if Mond is a reference to Mundi, as in the cosmic axis, Aemond could mean against the cosmic axis, against the world. And what does Night King do? He causes the long night. He throws the world off its axis. So Aemond is a Night's King figure, and he rides Vhagar, who is a symbol of the ice dragon. So Aemond, he is very much, he's riding the North Star, the axis of the world, and he's throwing it off. So it's really terrific Night's King symbolism that ties to Aemond. And also Tormund, because of this horn, waking the sleepers, again, calling the comet, signaling the apocalypse. Now, Tormund's kids, their names continue all this stuff. So he's got Toreg, Torwind, Drin, Dormund, and Munda. So Munda, this is what makes us take the M-O-N-D, Mond, and think, oh, Mund or Mundi, like Mund meaning hand or mouth and Mundi meaning world. So his daughter is Munda. So that's the daughter of the world. This is like the Mother Earth goddess figure. Okay. There is Toreg. So if Tor means mountain, we're talking about the egg of the world. So you think of like the cosmic egg, rebirth of the world after the long night, stuff like that. Also Aegon, and so I figured out what Aegon's name means. I told you I was going to mention this, Tim. So Gon, gone in Aegon, is Latin. It ties to a Latin word Gone, which means seed or like foundation. So the starting of a line, the beginning of a line, that's what Gon refers to. That's why Aegon's name is Aegon. And so with Toreg, yeah, it's more stuff about the world egg, rebirth of the ages of the world, cycles of the earth, stuff like that. So then we've got Dormund. Well, the name Dortmund with a D means mouth of the river. So there you get that mouth again. So you got the mouth of the hill, mouth of the river. And then Drinna means rumble or roar. So Tormund, he's always roaring and bellowing and blowing the horn, whose roaring fills the earth. So this is more related ideas. Oh, the river mouth. I'm sorry. I just skipped right over it. We should be thinking about the river of time. The weirwoods represent the river of time, and their mouths are the entrance to it. So Bran is going through the weirwood mouth, and he's going to the other side of the wall. So he's messing with the river of time. The wall represents the frozen river of time. So with the river mouth, it's more weirwood mouth stuff. And when we think about waking giants in the earth to destroy the wall, that might involve all the weirwood trees that might be under the wall, literally making them shake the wall down. So like these ideas, yeah, they're all related. And then we've got the Jormungandr thing, which I already explained. Tormund, similar to Jormungandr, and Jormungandr is a reference to a snake, which, begins Ragnarok, shakes the world, and all that stuff. So there you go. Damn, exactly. I know. I don't know how much sense that made, but this is what George is drawing from with all of the names of Tormund's children and Tormund. And I think the reason why he's talking about these hills and the world and the Axis Mundi and the entrance to the River of Time, this all has to do with the new long night coming and this Horn of Jormungand stuff. So, yeah.
Really good. I mean, my contribution to it was things that we learned in 8th grade health. That
the squint that you just did, Tim.
But chat already said it. You understand the womb of the world. But I do want to comment on like the idea of the weirwood shaking. So we've talked about too, like when trees can send messages to each other, and they know that like if a tree is diseased, they can untangle their roots from one another and cut it off. But if waking giants, with how extensive the weirwood system is, if something were to happen, like let's say to cause all of the weirwood roots to untangle in one massive move, that would be one hell of an earthquake.
It would.
If that's what yeah. If waking giants from the earth is literally waking the weirwoods and causing like the root system to tremble.
Yes, it's somewhat at odds with my idea that the horn actually calls um, the comet and that's what's going to cause all the earthquakes. But it's an
Mhm.
idea that stands alone pretty well. So I've always kept it alive in my little headcanon brain space. All right, so let's move on from Tormund. Let's save this stream. Yeah, a lot to talk about. So Orell,
Mhm.
tell us about
So
Orell. Tim.
Orell is a skin changer. His main animal was his eagle, which he was using for scouting reasons. He is killed by Jon. His human body and another wildling who is attending to him are killed by Jon. So he dies while his consciousness is in his eagle. So like this gives us this is our introduction to the whole second life thing. Because while his physical body dies, his consciousness lives on in that eagle. And it recognizes Jon. Like Orell is in that eagle holding a grudge against him. And he will later show up and attack Jon, and that's how Jon gets the scar on his face. That eagle is taken by Varamir Sixskins, and Varamir says, like, he knows that Orell is still in there. He tells Jon, I can hear him whispering about you. I can hear Orell's rage. But it's while Varamir is using that eagle to scout, for some reason, the eagle bursts into flames. Melisandre takes credit for it, but that is what kills off. It has an effect on Varamir. Like when it happens, he feels the last remnants of Orell slipping away. And I guess technically he goes back to being Varamir Five Skins at that point when the eagle blows up.
You just said Melisandre takes credit for it. Is there another theory about what set the eagle on fire other than the witch who meant to set the eagle on fire? I was not aware.
I have no other culprits, but it's the only explanation we have. Just how she did it.
And then we've got what was my other? Oh yeah, I was just gonna say that I feel like if an eagle made solid contact with your face,
Mm-hmm.
you'd be pretty messed up. I mean, I don't know if anybody's ever seen an eagle up close, like in a nature reserve or something like that. One time at the Sacramento County Fair, they had a bald eagle, one that had been injured and taken in captivity and stuff. And they had it sitting on a stump, with a fence around it, good 15 feet of clear space in every direction. But you could get that close and look at it. It's bloody terrifying. The thing's claws are the size of a human hand, except for that your entire finger is a claw. I mean, can you imagine like that dripping into your face? You'd be so mutilated. I mean, you'd be losing an eye or just, I feel like it's underplayed in the artwork and stuff, like how messed up Jon would be. Because in the story, like it grabs a hold of him for a second and it's like slashing at his face. Like, I just want to dramatize that. You'd be either dead or horribly misfigured. I mean, Jesus Christ, dude. My favorite YouTube video ever, you can find it. If you type in eagle throws goat off mountain, you can find this really funny video with this dramatic music of eagles attacking mountain goats somewhere I think it's like in the Andes or South America. And they literally swoop in, they grab the goat, and then they fly a good bit away from the cliff and just drop the goat down hundreds of feet, and then they go collect the dead body and feast on it. And it's this hunting technique that they've developed. It's terrifying. I don't know what to say except for go look it up. Jesus. If that sounds like your jam. But yeah. They're huge and they're terrifying. That's all I want to say. So poor Jon. And yeah. We hates it. The other thing about Varamir is that if Orell's eagle is his sixth skin, that means that Varamir was only recently promoted to Varamir's six skins right before we met him, and that he was previously Varamir five skins, which I never hear anyone talk about.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, and there's always the low-hanging fruit that is the Varamir foreskin joke.
There you go. The people in the chat. Oh my God, what did I just watch? It's a 26-second video. It's insane. OMG. Yeah, I told you. It's absolutely insane. I can hear the music in my brain right now. It's epic. It's epic. Anyway. It's like the snippet of some nature video in Spanish. I don't even know where it's from, but okay. So anyways, eagles are terrifying. And yeah, Varamir, or we're talking about Orell. Yeah. So that's it. He lives on in the eagle. He still hates Jon. And yeah, the eagle is taken by Varamir and then killed by Melisandre. Now, Varamir, he is a nasty, filthy R-word committer. And he is basically, like I said, a petty warlord. We all know the story. He's got 3 wolves, a shadowcat, a snow bear, and Orell's eagle. He killed his brother. He killed his master Hagon. He tried to kill Thistle and steal her body. He's one of the worst people in the story. He's pathetic. He's absolutely vile. And, you know, even when he joins Mance, no one really likes him. His snow bear and his shadowcat hate him and fight him. So, yeah. Kind of enough said about Varamir, right? Like, Rattleshirt's a little more interesting. You did the notes for this. Why don't you tell us about Rattleshirt?
So, yeah, Rattleshirt, known as the Lord of Bones, because he wears boiled leather armor covered in bones. It has human bones in it and then various animals. They say like aurochs, goats, basically whatever he could find. But his helm is a broken giant skull. He distrusts wargs and the Night's Watch. So just going to show like, yeah, wargs are revered, but they're not honored by everyone. He also rides a goat-like horse that's also armored in bone. So him in that bone shirt, riding this white goat, this like dead horse-like thing. So that's obvious death imagery right there with all that. But the big thing about Rattleshirt is his end. He is glamored to look like Mance Rayder and killed in his place. Melisandre has a wooden cage constructed from wood from the haunted forest. It's made from all different kinds of trees, but we're told specifically that weirwood is used in the construction. And what happens is when they light this up, even though the cage is made of wood, the body burns before the cage does. So that like gives us a hint that weirwood is like a slow burn, which we'll talk about later. I just wanted to introduce that into the conversation when we get to Skagos. But he is given a quick death by Jon and his archers to end his suffering. Now, of course, the show went a whole different way, where it is Mance in the cage being burned that they shoot. Mute it.
I was just saying, we talked about the horror of the execution last week, the morality of it. And it is interesting that weirwood appears to be slow burning. It makes sense. It turns to stone, so you wouldn't think it would burn fast. And, yeah, Rattleshirt's a pretty scummy person, too. I mean, wearing bones everywhere, it's kind of weird, you know? It's kind of antisocial. It's off-putting. Yeah, he rides a goat-like horse. So, yeah, his symbolism is tremendous. It's very otherish, Night King-ish. I don't want to get too lost in that, but yeah, it's important that Mance Rayder is glamored as him. Night King burned in the weirwood cage is maybe the most important idea that he gives us. You know, Jon going over to Rattleshirt is foreshadowing of Jon being possessed by the others. I've talked about that. And him being burned in the cage is essentially Azor Ahai dying in the weirwood net. Yeah, and becoming Night's King. So, yeah. That's
We've talked about that a lot of times. Azor Ahai trapped in a weirwood
Thank you,
prison.
Tim. I say that a lot. It's true. It's my king in
Yeah.
yellow. So, and so, okay. Dalla and Val are sisters. They both have a little bit of a woods witch vibe to them. Mance Rayder says Dalla, it's a real wise woman that I've found here. She's a true queen. She's the one that has the Horned Lord sorcery quote on tap. And she's using it as advice to Jon, saying, hey, the shortest path is not always the best, right? And Val seems like she might be sorceress straight up. She comes and goes in the haunted forest as she pleases without fear. She's able to find Tormund and the Wildling host and bring them back to Jon and the wall. Dalla dies, of course, giving birth to Aemon Battleborn during the battle beneath the wall, and Jon is in fact protecting her during the battle while she is giving birth, which is a very interesting sort of tangled web of storytelling there. And so we know Val initially has a pet named Jarl, who is really good at climbing the wall, but he dies climbing the wall next to Jon, in fact. He's climbed it a dozen times or more. In fact, he's only 20. But he's a very good climber. But yeah, he dies next to Jon, and this frees up Val to later flirt with Jon and also be promised to all kinds of people by Stannis, who wants to use Val as again, the Greenlanders misunderstand the wildling culture. And so he thinks that Val is a sister to a queen, therefore she's a princess. So she's a pretty princess, and that's a valuable political chip, right?
Yeah. And then it's also Val, though, that brings up Shireen, that grayscale doesn't act, it never heals. It's never cured. It's just laying dormant.
Right.
And this is why, like, I have this long-standing idea that if Melisandre is going to burn Shireen in some kind of act to help Stannis, I think Val is going to be the one who lights Val's going to be the one to light the torch. Like, she has it in for that kid, and that's like the downside to Val.
Oh, that's interesting. The name Jarl means lord, and that's where we get the word earl, like as in the rank, like baron, earl, duke. Interesting. So that's similar to Magnar, and I think that's probably complementary to Val's Night's Queen symbolism, because she does a lot of Night's Queen stuff with Jon. So it makes sense that she was married to a lord, kind of, if you will. Jarl, not Jarl. Yeah, true. Jarl. Just like it would be Yorman and not Jorman, probably. So I've talked about Val's Night's Queen stuff a bunch in the, Night's King and Queen videos. So check those out if you want those scenes with Jon. The Magnars. Okay, so we talked about them a little bit. They got the weir spear and the bronze armor. Styr is bald, and he has no ears. So very dramatic looking. He leads the attack on Castle Black and eventually dies in that whole collapsing stair booby trap. And Tim caught the passage where he's observed to be falling. So he jumps rather than burning. He leaps to his death. That's important for symbolism, but we don't have time for that. Burning stairway to heaven, that's the burning weirwood. The people jumping out are like the green seers that become others, like in the Fallen Dreamers in Bran's Dream. We did a chapter reading on that. So, yeah, don't have time for that.
Yeah. It's just the important part is the original Robert Frost poem, The World Ends in Fire and Ice. So the idea is, what killed Styr when he falls? Was it the fire or was it the ice that killed him?
Exactly. Yeah, it doesn't matter. Either way. Yeah. But it's a really cool disaster because George is using ice and fire simultaneously. So, let's see. Then we've got Sigorn, who I've talked about already. He marries Alice. He turns the Karstark winter sun, which is a white sun on a black field, into a fiery sun on a white field. So he brings the fire. There's some symbolism there. We don't have time for that. We're going to keep going. But the question is, how this is a very important set of characters, and how will they shape the plot going forward? We've already talked about that. they will play a key role in establishing a new order, which reconciles Wildlings to Westeros, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We don't have time for symbolism. Also, here's the symbolism. Exactly. So then we got a couple of these nasty Wildlings. Tim, tell us about these two.
So Borok is another skin changer, but his is a boar. He chills in the Lich Yard. So the symbolism again for Borok is with the boar. It's what I feel like it's the death of summer, because the boar is what kills Robert Baratheon, our last Summer King. So Borok being a skin changer with a boar in the Lich Yard, and his boar rooting around the graves, like the symbolism, which we don't have time for, is the death of summer. That is what Borok represents. Mute it.
Exactly. And as AMB Films points out, they hang out in the Lich Yard. So, yeah. More of the same. Tim, do you need a break? I can play the music. The chat is saying they need to pee too. Let's play the music and we'll come right back. How about that? Sounds good. All right.
Needs to pee.
And it is right here. And we're back. All right. So look. Where are we here? All right. Garrett King's blood. Harma Dog's head. Okay. So, Tim, I don't know about doing this whole Rick and Skagos thing on the end of the stream, bro. We're like...
We're 3 hours in.
We're 3 hours in. It's gotten dark here. I need to go take care of my birds. And I know you have a lot to say about these parallels between Rickon and all that stuff.
And
I feel like it maybe just do it its own stream or something. Like
Skagos needs its own stream.
Because it's going to take at least 45 minutes, even if we rush it, to get through the Skagos section, don't you think?
I came up with a lot when I was doing my digging.
Guys, did you see that? Again, the squint. Did you see that look that he just made? It was pause, squint. I came up with a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. There's only 3 Skagosi houses mentioned, and yet I wrote paragraphs. I swear, I came up with so much.
So let's finish off these Wildling VIPs, and then we will do the Skagos Rickon stream. I'll figure out when to schedule it. But yeah, I can't do 4-hour stream. I really can't. I got to draw the line somewhere. I'm sorry. So Borok is a nasty boar skin changer. We don't know what he's going to do. He's just hanging around waiting to cause trouble. So far, he is the reason why Jon lucked up Ghost, which led to him being killed without Ghost. That's all that he's done so far. So I figure he will cause trouble when all hell breaks loose at the wall, essentially. So Harma Dog's head kills a dog every fortnight for a standard. Now, I noticed that the name Harma, so to be clear, she carries around a dead dog on a pole instead of a flag. So her name Harma seems like a name, a combination of the words harm and karma. So how do you harm your karma? You kill puppies. That's how you do that. Yeah. So I don't know what to say. She's an awful person. She urges Mance to kill Jon when he first shows up. And then she dies in battle beneath the wall. So.
Yeah. And that's what she does. So I've said, I don't trust people that don't like dogs. And if a dog has a problem with you, then you are not to be trusted. So the fact that Harma Dog's Head dies in a skirmish, we don't even like, it's very, there's no glory to it. She just dies to some nameless knight in Stannis' entourage. And that's it. And that's what she deserves.
Clover Azar says, and nothing of value was lost. That's correct.
Exactly.
So then we have Garrett Kingsblood. He claims to be descended from Raymond Redbeard, but Tormund says, cowardly brother, Red Craven. That's who he's descended from. But either way, he has 3 beautiful red-headed daughters. And Selyse, on behalf of Stannis and Mel, is trying to arrange marriages between the Wildlings and Westerosi. And so these 3 daughters are betrothed to Hand of the Queen, Axel Florent, or Hand of Stannis's hand, I guess. But he's a queen's, he's loyal to Selyse, kind of. So that's Axel Florent, Sir Bruce Buckler, and Sir Maelgorn of Redpool. And then Selyse cleans up Raymond Redbeard and dresses him in some of Stannis' old clothes, and then observes that he looks as good as any Southern lord. So
she also believes that he should be the king beyond the wall because she's buying this story of descent from Raymond Redbeard. And again, thinking in her own Westerosi terms, she's thinking, well, if you're the descendant of a king, then that means you should be the king, not this Mance Rayder guy. There was a broken lineage of it. So it's just Selyse illustrating, like, you don't get it. You don't get these people's culture. And the fact that you're just so readily willing to believe this guy's story as well.
I also want to know why nobody's done a fanfic of like Selyse and Garrett Kingsblood. I mean, dressing him in Stannis' clothes and then being like, yeah, he looks like a lord to me. You should be king beyond the wall. Like, what's going on there?
Selyse has needs.
Selyse has needs too. That's right. Sorry, random stuff. Okay, so we got a couple of woods witches to round it out. Mother Mole, she is a woods witch that makes her burrow beneath a hollow tree. That's why she's called Mother Mole. This is symbolism, guys. This is Nissa stuff, living in the Weirwood Net. She had visions of ships coming to carry the Wildlings to safety from Hardhome across the narrow sea. Now, that vision turned out to be mostly correct. There were ships that came across the narrow sea and carried the Wildlings away. Unfortunately, Tim, they were slave ships. Yeah.
Yeah. It is, the commentary on that is the ripple effect that Dany's actions are having, because while Dany's trying to clean up the slave trade, that has not stopped the slavers. So the unforeseen consequences is this is just causing the slavers to look for new markets and new sources of slaves. And the free folk, being in the desperate situation that they have become perfect victims for people from the free cities sailing across the narrow sea, looking for, essentially looking for new bodies since their old sources have dried up because of Dany.
Yep, and it also reminds you of Melisandre, how like you can have a vision and get it mostly right, but then be a little bit wrong and be totally wrong. So,
but you missed one, But you missed one key feature, and that made all the difference.
Yeah, and so of course, the slave ships come and carry away a bunch of wildlings from Hardhome, and it turns into a scene of horror. Then we've got let's see. Morna White Mask.
Yeah. I call her the Quaith of the North, but Morna White Mask is a woods witch warrior who wears a white weirwood mask because we love our alliteration. and she is given control of Queensgate, and she tells like Jon, I can be your man or your woman, whichever you prefer. Which so there's kind of like this sort of gender fluidity to Morna White Mask, which is also something we see with the Moon Singers. So again, it's like more of this Eastern stuff showing up in the far, far north, and Morna being like, if we think of Quaithe and her red mask, and just like the concept of the yin of like yin and yang, here's our red and here's our white. The red lacquer mask is of a shy, and then here's in the far north a white weirwood mask. It becomes two sides of the same coin.
Yep. Yeah, I liked that comparison a lot. And it's even more poignant because, of course, you know, Dany has Quaithe, and then here's a strange echo
Jon
of Quaithe
with
showing
Morna.
up. So keep an eye on Morna White Mask. She might have some weird magic that could be important. You never know. But it's not a whole lot to... Oh, she's given control of Queensgate. Oh, that's kind of actually important. Oh, that's actually good symbolism, too, because, of course, Queensgate is a commentary on the Night Fort, Weirwood Gate. That's where Night's Queen was potentially, you know, creating others at the Night Fort. So that is the Queen's Gate. So then we have a new queen at Queen's Gate, and she has a Weirwood mask because Night's Queen might be inside the Weirwood tree, actually, creating others from the inside. So, yeah, very good. And then, yeah, Skagos. So, guys, yeah, please, I'm done. We'll come back and do enormous horny goats a different time. Unicorn goats. But, yeah. There you go. Thank you. Subscribe to my channel. Subscribe to Tim's channel. He's over here. And, oh, I've got a new video coming this week. It will be Jon Azor Ahai. And it will be here likely Tuesday morning. So look out for that. Look out for that. I'm mostly done with it. Been working on it all week. It'll be the first regular produced video in a while. So about an hour of Jon Azor Ahai stuff. Got some new things. And yeah. Tim, you working on anything right now? Just herding cats?
Herding cats. I think I'm going to go back to... I want to finish up the Zothic Legend Cycle stories, and then once that's all done, I want to do the Guard It by Squishers video, where I'm going to go into more of this. It's not Rickon on Skagos, but also more about Theon and Asha's their symbolism that's tied up in the Cthulhu mythos that George is drawing on. So that'll be like our next Lovecraft in A Song of Ice and Fire. Will be Asha and Theon will be the main focus.
That's cool. Well, that's a little different than what we usually talk about. So I'll look forward to that. And yeah, what can I say about the Rickon thing, guys? It's fitting that I promised it years ago and promised it again today, and now delaying it again. But yeah, I don't know. 3 hours is 3 hours. So I'll try to come back with that one real soon. And yeah, we'll figure it out. So thank you, guys. And I'll see you on Tuesday with a new video. Cheers. Where's that button?
Good night.
There it is.